Oi, caramba. Okay. Hello. Hello. So, in answer to some of the questions in the chat, how did the corgi get on the computer without destroying it? That is a good question. Another question is, how did the corgi get through the window? Because the corgi, without any human help, possibly with canine help, got through the window. Managed to get on the back behind the screens and get up to on top of the PC. Managed to do a sea of destruction in his wake as he went, and was sat up there looking at me going, so that's the question. How did the corgi get through the window? There are no humans at this end of the property other than myself. Okay? A is the only human down here. Or I was. I then took him out and took him back. So, there are many questions to ask in this situation. And please note, it didn't happen exactly at 7 o'clock, I must admit, but I delayed it at 7 o'clock and I just went, I'm still pulling fluff out of this computer. Knight 6831, that's not the immediate question. There are many questions to get to, but before, we are going to get to those questions, but it's going to be a fun one. So, hello everyone. Honestly, the Triple Entente didn't dismantle the Ottoman Empire. It had already dismantled itself fairly effectively. That's the reality. Do we need to... I'm regularly working too hard. In a nice way, Drakenred, I'm always working too hard. I like it like that. Basically, the Triple Entente, basically the dismantling of the Ottoman Empire is more it was going to happen at some point for anyway. The sick man of Europe jokes about the Ottoman Empire had been going on for so long, it was absurd. And one of the reasons why they propped it up was to balance Russia. With Russia going through a civil war, it was finally time to let the Ottoman Empire do what it had been going to do naturally for years, and then sort it out. And that's what literally happened. I wouldn't even call the British way to end empire a right way. It's just the British do it in a way which, frankly, no one else has ever managed to accomplish in the history of empires. Just think about this. There is no other empire in history which has managed to turn itself into a voluntary organisation where more people want to join it for sporting and cultural and economic links. It's brilliant! I mean... literally, it's a feat of frickin' genius. There is a reason not empires don't usually manage it. Actually achieving that is something which, like it or dislike it, you have to appreciate it. No, poorly fluff is not conductive to good PC cooling. Honestly, here is the other thing. This is going to sound weird, but one of the things I've noticed, and believe it or not, if you go to the various corgi owners, real corgi owners Facebook groups, not just people who idolize the joy of owning a corgi, but those who actually do have a corgi, the amount of discussions about how do you clean the fluff out of ovens, because it gets everywhere and will literally cake your oven, and your smell of all your cooking when you're doing the oven will be burning corgi fur, which is a very unique smell. It literally gets everywhere. There are 4-gauge wagon kits you need to build. Cool. You answer your own question. He's a corgi. New Active before some. How remote of a Welsh corgi are we talking about? Milford, Porthmagog, Boff. Now, no one really specified which Welsh dockyard, and so I haven't specified it, but I'm presuming it's somewhere around Pembroke. Wayne, you sound doing like you're doing well in UAD. I'm still sorry you remind me that the Navy Bureau existed even in all their glorious assaulting competency. Oh, there are so many of those. Hi, Leslie. Right, and hello, everyone. So, 2 things. One, if at any point I'm taking more tablets in front of you, which seems to be a regular occurrence in a live, it's because my sister cooked last night. It happens, okay? And, yeah. Today's video. It is a live. Again, I have to remember, I have to get a warning. This is a live. I'm going to be chatting with the chat. Now, you should be able to watch the chat playback below or beside, depending on whether you're watching this on a phone or on a computer, and what angle you're trying to watch it at, or a tablet as well. That also has a different scenario. That's the thing. This is going to be a live, okay? I give a heads up these days. Yeah, if I end up running out the door, you know why. I'll be back a couple of minutes later. I'll just make a picture bigger. This will be it for a couple of minutes. Right, so. Nightmare Return. Today's topic is Patron 103, as suggested by Michael66. Speaking of patron suggestions, they are currently live for July, are live. The patron vote will start on Sunday, so you have a couple of days to get suggestions in, and then the patron vote for July will start. If for those of you who are keeping count and looking ahead, you'll notice that 3 out of 4 of June's patron premieres are already scheduled, and my aim is to have all of them up before the end of May. My aim is to have as many of those videos for June and July done by the end of May as physically possible. I want every Tuesday and every Thursday video done before the end of May. I also would like to have all the Saturday videos done as well. I'm not going to guarantee having got all the Friday videos done before the end of May, but there again, my view is I can do key ships and key aircraft, and I can record them on the road. So, yes. And the Monday videos are, well, they are UAD streams, and the Wednesday videos are random, so who knows what randomness will come with. Who knows what randomness I will generate for those as time goes on. It might be me trying to draw scrunklies, which are something my mother has just picked up on, apparently. We're not going there. I'm not getting into this all. It's way too much. Way too much. So, with that all said, let's begin. My coach, Fluffy researches and thinks you repair Fluff. Don't tell him gas engineers are corgi fitters. Look, he already has worked that one out, and every time we have a gas engineer over to look at our boiler, he won't stop woofing until he's able to get there and sniff at the boiler. He feels he has to sniff the boiler. As I've said before, corgis are the tribal destroyers of the canine world. You know, it's like, whenever anyone tells me that a Chihuahua is the most vicious dog you can see, you know, because they see their bundle diagram. No, they're not. They're really not. Try standing between a corgi and its food. Try standing between try attacking someone a corgi's protective over. You'll realize very quickly that a Chihuahua might have loud aggression, but the corgi has it just under the surface ready to go, and that's just so worse. Because that's controlled, calculated aggression, which will come out in full power. As I've said before, I never worry when we're on holiday and my sister sleeps with the window open about anyone hurting her. Because anyone entering her room is going to come face to face with a corgi, who's going to go through 3 thoughts in lightning fast succession. 1, you're waking him up and it's not breakfast time. 2, you're waking him up and you haven't brought food. 3, you're waking him up in the middle of his night, disturbing him, posing a threat to his little missus, and you haven't brought food. You are now therefore food. And what is about to happen to you will probably be added to the Geneva guidelines of things not to be done. Very shortly, if there's anything left to identify what was done to you. German Shepherds are probably a nice light cruiser. Good all-around general purpose systems. There will be still streams on Sundays. The brew ships will still go on. Brew ships will be live. But the thing is, the brew ship's timing might change a bit depending on where I am and what the time is at where I am. I guess you haven't answered my question about the whole non-treaty Yorktown being Essex as it's related to one of the patrons. That's the thing. I basically, if there are patron questions coming up which are on that topic, I'm going to go meh. Not until the patron topics come out. Geneva guidelines. No. You see, Geneva guidelines are produced after the Canadians have done something and they've recorded it. No, someone has to be around to record what a corgi does, and they don't tend to leave witnesses. No, because Canadians leave witnesses so they can make Geneva Conventions. Right. So, with that all said, Nightmare returns. 4 World War I Town class are discovered by the Royal Navy in 1938. Now, I was, at first, when suggested this, I almost took it as a bit of a joke. And I was going, okay, so this is going to be a bit funny. And then the more I started thinking about this, the more I thought, hang on, this is actually quite capable and quite scary. Because they're very good hulls. And they're very well-made hulls. One of the legacies of the Town class is their level of construction, and one of the things that's often forgotten about the Town class we're getting into is exactly what comes from their line. And these are well-built light cruisers. Yes, they're light cruisers, but they're light cruisers built in a period where a light cruiser was a lot stronger than what it would be called in comparative terms in World War II. I'm slightly worried that half the chat all had the same thought all at once about corgis. Now, as you know, we always do a shameless book plug in this channel, and we always do it because it's how thanking everyone for helping the channel grow is important, and frankly, I will always do that. And thank you for people who like, share, and subscribe, and advertise when we're on live, and put it out on social media, etc. That's all great fun. Thank you for that. And helping the channel grow is really good. But as I said many times, and will always say, I'm an academic. I get promoted in my professional career based on my in the UK, based on how well my publications do, and how well my journal articles do. So, basically, for that to happen, I need to sell books. But don't worry. Don't worry. This channel helps the circle of life continue because, thanks to all of you and your support, I'm able to buy books like these, which have literally arrived today while I'm packing books. I literally am buying more books while packing books to take to move house. They're good books, though. Of Islands, Ports and Sea Lanes, Africa and the Indian Ocean in the Second World War. It's a really interesting book by Ashley Jackson, who's an Australian academic, I think. And Those Wallowing Beauties, the story of landing barges in World War II. And again, it's a really interesting book. This one actually came from the Cambridgeshire Libraries. And, yeah. It's all put together by Landing Craft Association, so, and supported by them. So it's a really, really interesting collection of discussions about landing craft and their history and historiography, and their operations and the service, and what, and basically also the crew involved. And I just randomly turned to a page. 24th of May. Many of us were instructed to take part in a review of landing craft by His Majesty King George VI. Unfortunately, I was involved in repairing a badly damaged LCT that the King boarded ML 529 from the cruiser HMS Scylla, which was to become the Eastern Task Force flagship of Rear Admiral Sir Philip Vian. Good books. Doc, I'm out of sync. How am I out of sync? Am I out of sync for everyone? Or just or just Steve? Definitely. So so in honor of Her Majesty Late Queen, in the future, Royal Navy hypersonic anti-ship missiles will be named Corgi in the present of the form material. Oh good lord. A Corgi missile. The only known missile which is known to turn around and come back and go, does my butt look big in this? So, let's think about this. The Town class light cruiser. Okay, I'm good now. The Town class cruisers of 1910. They are some fun ships. They truly are. They truly are fun vessels. Why is Simplecast wanting me to sign in? And by fun vessels, I mean they are a very sturdy design. There is a reason the Royal Navy produces as many as they do. They build 21 of these ships. They build so many, the Germans actually think they build more than 21. But they do have some variations. There are some variations. And this is where things get really interesting from the get-go in this class, because when I was looking over this option in this class as a result of what they were and what they sort of act like, I was thinking through the various options for these ships. Now, when you go through them, and you look at their stylings, they start off as protected cruisers, really, or second-class cruisers. They are suitable for trade protection and fleet duties they were to be. And they're quite big ships for their time. We're talking about things which are honestly bigger than the C-class cruisers. C-class cruisers are 5,030 tons deep load, about 4,150 tons standard when they first enter service. And later ones, well, they vary in weight and some get heavier. The last ones are 5,300 tons in full load. But let's be honest, the Town class could be up to 5,530 tons in full load for the larger, later ones. Everyone, I'm not going to say it again, but you are jumping ahead with the questions. So the thing is, we're going to get to that point. There is an actual slides which deal with that discussion. So the reason I'm not answering the question is, despite how many times you're earnestly putting it in the chat, and I do realize you're really interested in it, I'm not answering it until I get to the slide. Okay? It's going to happen. Now, when we consider again their history, this is where things get interesting, because the classic question, and the question was, Wales, in a remote part of a Welsh dockyard. Well, for them to end up in a Welsh dockyard, to me, that means they had to have been sent to Wales. So that's a criteria from the get-go. And if they have to be sent to Wales, that means I have to cross out the ones which get sent to Cornwall. Like Bristol. Or Lancashire. Like Glasgow here. She gets sent to Morecambe. Or Gloucester, well, Gloucester I could have technically done because she goes to Britain Ferry. Gloucester could be done. So, that gets us into this second slide already rather quickly. And this is the second slide. These are the ones which actually go to Wales. We have Gloucester, which is sold for scrap in 1921. We have Chatham, which is sold for scrap in 1926. Southampton, sold for scrap in 1926 at Pembroke, and so is Chatham, also at Pembroke. So they're both at Pembroke Dockyard, okay? And then we have Birmingham and Lowestoft, which are also sold for scrap at Pembroke Dockyard in 1931. And Birkenhead and Chester, they're the largest ones, but they're sold for scrap in November 1921, in October 21, at Newport and Lanley. And Lanant. So I think you're probably going to work out quite quickly which four I decided would be the ones to survive. Because my theory was, well, let's say they get sold to Pembroke Dockyard, but let's say Toss Ward in Pembroke Dockyard, the scrappers, let's say there's a gentleman in there like me. And he thinks, well, these are good ships. Royal Navy might need them. I've got a nice freshwater river I can store them in, just up the river. I've got a lot of metal on the scrap market right now. They're not much worth to me scrapping, but I can leave them there for a few years and see what happens. Now, it's 13 years for Southampton and Chatham, but it's only 8 years for Birmingham and Lowestoft. That's a fairly good scenario to me. That's a fairly sensible scenario to me, because, again, if you've got Birmingham, Lowestoft, Chatham, and Southampton, 26, 31, all in Pembroke, this is a logical scenario of where they are. Whilst you might want those, the Birkenhead class and the Birmingham, because they're the two newest ones, the trouble is the Birkenhead are broken up in 1921, and they're at Newport and Lalami. And Gloucester is at Lelant. So those three are all at different ports. There's no reason for them to be get together. But the question said, find 4, and that was very interesting to me from the get-go, because it made me think that our question author had worked this one out as well. And find 4 sitting in a Welsh dockyard. Well, there you go. You have 4, and they would be in the same dockyard. They'd all be in Pembroke. Now, there is already a problem here, because Birmingham and Southampton would be repeat names with the 1930 Town class. They'd have to be worked out. I'm fairly sure I know how the Royal Navy worked them out, but we'll leave that to one side. Lowestoft is also a bit of an issue, because, if I'm not mistaken, there is an HMS Lowestoft, which is a sloop at this point. Yes, a Grimsby-class sloop launched in 1934. U-59. So, technically, 3 of them have names. Which have an issue. There is no Chatham. So Chatham's the only one. I think at that point what you probably get is the Royal Navy names them the Chatham class and gives them 3 more sea names. I would say that's probably how they would get round it. So they take some of the scenarios of probably some of the lost seas, maybe from World War I, or that had already been broken up, and, well, probably rename them with them. So maybe it's Cambrian, maybe it's Canterbury, maybe it's Castor. It doesn't matter. The Royal Navy will find a way. They'll find a name for them. Castor, Cambrian, by the way, are all sort of broken up in, I think, mostly, well, she's at Sheerness, which is, that's North Kent, and, yeah, they're mostly broken up, it seems, on the east coast, so, again, they're far away from them. Too. So basically someone squirreled away some light cruisers and then apparently forgot about them or died, and no one bothered checking up on them beyond a prepaid maintenance agreement. Yeah. My good. Speaking as the author. No, didn't work it out. Pure chance, honest. I know you prefer that, Leslie. Basically, this became very not unlikely the moment I found 4 were stored at Pembroke Dockyard and just went, this suddenly becomes a, how the frigate did this not happen historically? This almost becomes more true to form than British history. But anyways, they were decommissioned and sold, so the name is what is available, would it not? Name is technically available, yes, but then you wouldn't want to rename you don't like to rename ships. But if you have existing ships that have those names, you're not going to bring those names back. But there again, you can keep Chatham. And as Adelaide shows, yes, the 1910 towns can go for quite a while. So let's consider some of their stats. Now, before we get too far details, there's something that's worthwhile considering with the town class cruisers. Okay? Their design is what is modified to become the Atlantic cruisers. They're not the C-class cruisers. They're not their parents. The town class are the forebears of the Atlantic cruisers, which are the forebears of the Hawkins class. So simply put, you can draw a direct line from a county class cruiser in design and philosophy back to a town class cruiser. You can literally draw that direct line of evolution of designs. Now that's something to think about. A, it demonstrates the whole light cruiser of the county class heritage. But B, it also gives you an idea that these vessels very much fit within the Royal Navy structures at the time. Very much strict within, as fit within the Royal Navy's forms. And yes, they could go for various dogs. Corgi. Chihuahua. I'm thinking of other dogs with C names. The fact that Google immediately came up with dog breeds beginning with C when I just said that out loud just proves it's listening to me. You've got Cavalier King Charles Spaniel. You've got all sorts of different options. Seriously, the Royal Navy Clumber Spaniel, HMS they won't be Cockapoo. HMS Collie could be. The Royal Navy could come with some really interesting dog names if they wanted to go with it. They would think a theme for the 4 ships, and they would be called out on a theme. So you could. Well, that's the interesting thing. The light cruisers, i.e., Town class cruiser 1936. Their design heritage goes back more to the C class, which go to the scout cruisers. So, actually, the interesting thing is the Town class don't connect to the Town class as directly. Yes, there are some crossovers because of the experience defining the county class, etc. But the county class of 1936, their design heritage lies far more in the smaller cruisers prior to World War I than the Town class cruisers. HMS Clumber. Hello, Same Penguins. So yes, coal-fired would be possible. It could be possible to leave them coal-fired, but let's be honest, again, one of the scenarios you have to remember with Britain in World War II is at no point in World War II is the Royal Navy ever short of fuel. It's one of the mysteries of the war. We talk about all sorts of things. People talk about shortages of aviation fuel. They talk about shortages of all sorts of things. They don't talk about shortages of coal, and they don't talk about shortages of ship fuel. Read the books on World War II on the Royal Navy. At no point do you have discussions and things which are regular for the German Navy, a constant form aside, the Italian Regia Marina. Things which are an occasional discussion even for the Americans because of their lack of they're not having enough fast fleet oilers when they need them. You then look for the Royal Navy's records. No point are discussing fuel shortages, and there's a reason for that. The Royal Navy spent the entirety of the 20s and 30s stockpiling fuel everywhere in the frigating world. I mean, the interesting discussion I got into again was Malta, where at one point they were actually working out that, how viable was it to be using ship fuel for things, and they were told, oh, we've already turned our generators into running off ship fuel, because we have lots of that. The Japanese, one of the reasons why they operate from where they do in Southeast Asia is because they find the Royal Navy's store of fuel, and go, woohoo, we've got fuel! Trouble is, they couldn't get that fuel to where they needed it. The Royal Navy had such a large fuel shortage they experimented with anti-aircraft flamethrowers. Yeah, we're talking about the same service which supplied the fuel which was used to turn the sea into a burning ball of fire. Yeah. It's fun. Is the claim the British were down to 6 weeks of fuel in beginning of May 1943 for the other fuels then? Yes. It's for the other fuels. It's for aviation fuel. It's for everything else. It's not for ship fuel. It's one of the things. If they just imagine that line, if they said we're down to 6 weeks of fuel, barring that for that which we have for ships. Why? Because the Royal Navy is obsessed with procuring fuel. There was an interesting conversation I had with someone the other day was about the Royal Navy fuel storage scenarios. And they are still obsessed with buying fuel. Is all I'm going to leave it as. The Royal Navy are still obsessed. So, this is the thing. When we're looking at the Hawkins class, that's a good idea of, maybe some of the things you could have done with the Town class. Because in many ways, their hull is stressed in a similar way. Not stressed for a 7.5-inch gun. But not far below that, considering some of the strength put in there. It's, yeah, it's... World War II is a funny war. There are so many weird things going on there. So, what are the stats of the 4 surviving vessels? And I thought you'd enjoy this picture, because let's be honest, it's quite a cute picture of a Town class vessel. It is, of course, HMS Chatham, looking very happy. She was built by Chatham Dockyard in Kent. She was laid down in January 1911, launched November 1911, and commissioned December 1912. She had a length of 458 foot. That's 139.6 meters, a beam of 49 foot, 14.9 meters, a draft of 16 foot, 4.9 meters. The displacement was 5,400 long tons, or 5,500 tons in normal, and 6,000 long tons, 6,100 tons in full load. Now, one of the interesting things is their standard displacement doesn't really come up for either class, because honestly, I'm not sure if anyone ever bothered working them out. They were definitely not going to hit it on terms of the limitations. Both variants have 12 Yarrow-style boilers supplying 2 turbine sets driving 4 shafts with roughly 25,000 shaft horsepower and a top speed of 25.5 knots. Those Yarrow boilers are a mixture of coal and oil. So they are coal oil sprayers, which means they can run on either to an extent. And then you have 8 6-inch Mark 12 guns in single mounts, carrying 200 rounds per gun, which was unusual. Most crews at this period carried 150 rounds per gun. 2 21-inch 533mm submerged torpedo tubes, and a 3-inch air gun. Southampton also had a platform for operating aircraft. And it's pretty much the same for the Birmingham Sun class. They are really, really similar. They are about 30 centimeters shorter at 457 foot, rather than 458 foot. They have a slightly wider beam of 15.2 meters, 50 foot, rather than 49 foot. And they have a draft of 16 foot, 4.9 meters, exactly the same. They displace slightly more, 130 tons in normal more, and 40 tons more in full load. Or rather deep load, 140, 40 tons more in deep load. They have 9 6-inch Mark 12 guns, still carrying 200 rounds per gun, and they otherwise are exactly the same. So, you're dealing with a ship which is quite a well-built, solid platform. It's quite a flexible platform, and it's exactly what the British built it for. Those are, as they are in this scenario, are hand-fired. The coal is loaded by stokers. But, and they're certainly not powdered. If Fleet of Oceans is watching, they're not using powdered coal. Okay? But what they are is they do have oil sprayers. So you have the coal put in, burning away, and to add extra strength to it and extra heat to it, they spray oil onto it. Always fun. Now, what I was pleasantly surprised between subclasses is they're quite so similar. Again, this made my job rather easy. Rather easy, I do like in alternate history, because in this scenario, we're looking at an alternate history scenario, and basically we are giving the Royal Navy 4 more ships. But there are options here as to what they can get and what they will go to, because you see... So, the basic option, the easy thing to do would just go, well, like the C-Class, they become AA cruisers. And I honestly thought about that, but then I started playing around with some of the stats. And so this is going to be a point at which some of you are going to really dislike me. But I'm going to put the page up to full and you're going to get to see something. Now, the thing that made me interested in them was when I did the Town class stats, especially length to beam ratio, versus the more traditional cruiser profiled vessels. Carlisle class has a 10.38 length to beam ratio. Tribal class, again, those honestly not cruiser destroyers, a 10.33 ratio. The L&M class have a 9.77 ratio. And, well, the Chathams and the Birminghams, 9.37 and 9.16. What does that mean, a length to beam ratio of that? That means how many times is the beam going to length? And usually, the lower that number, the more you have a maneuverable ship. The higher that number, the faster you have as a ship. So if you want to see a ship built for speed, you're looking at the higher numbers. If you want to see a ship built for maneuverability, you go for the slightly lower numbers. Now, at their time, the Chathams and Birminghams were built for speed. But by this time, things have changed a bit. And so I looked through their size and their operations. And when I looked at them and thought mixed coal and oil boilers, I thought, well, I can change that. I can change that, and that's a very quick change. And they have 4 shafts. Carlisle, Tribals, L&M class all have 2 shafts, which limits the amount of power I can put through. Does, because I'm putting all that power onto the individual shafts. Well, the Birminghams and Chathams all have 4 shafts. And, well, I want their range to go up a bit. But I want them to be able to operate with the destroyers. I've got armour. I could actually work that up a bit, and it would probably be quite good. It wouldn't take me much effort to upgrade the deck armour a bit. And that's pretty much all I need to do. So I started working out the various figures and the various tonnage options. And again, I did consider, look, shall I leave the Mark 6 or the 6-inch Mark 12 guns there? And as tempting as that was, I thought, well, I'm going to take some ideas from the C-Class, but I'm not going to take my weapons from the C-Class. I started thinking through and going, right, what happens if I put 10 quick-firing 4.7-inch in Mark 9 in 5 twin mounts? What happens if I add in 4 quick-firing 4-inch in 2 twin mounts? And add in 3 quadruple pom-pom guns. And 3 quadruple 0.5-inch A machine guns. And 2 quadruple torpedo launchers. What am I going to get? And what happens if I fix the bow, make it a little bit more Atlantic bow scenario, so it's slightly better for the Atlantic? So it goes up to roughly 140 meters. And broaden it out a bit, you know, with some extra strength. Well, very quickly, if I'm aiming for 15.2 meters, that A gives me a 0.3 meters to add onto the beam of the Chathams. But also I'm growing the Chathams by 0.4 meters in length. I'm growing the Birmingham's by 0.7 meters in length and not doing anything about their beam. So that gives them a length to beam ratio of 9.21 on in a sort of if that scenario. The draft I've left again at 16 foot because there's no point changing that. And honestly, I've played around the weight a bit, but putting them up to roughly 5,600 in normal and 5,200 in deep load doesn't seem wrong. It's, you know, a sort of roughly 100 to 70 ton upgrade, depending on Chatham's or Birmingham's, in terms of normal, and a 60 ton to 100 to a 60, yeah, 100 to a 60 ton upgrade on deep load. Makes all sense. All fits. And 4 Admiralty free drum boilers driving 4 turbines. Roughly aiming for 64,000 shaft horsepower did not seem unreasonable to be getting. Should give her a speed of at least 30 knots. And I'm being very conservative on the speed there. If you think about it, we're taking it up from 25,000 shaft horsepower to 64,000 shaft horsepower without much effort. I wouldn't be surprised if also you can drop it down to roughly 2 stacks. So they go from 4 funnel arrangement to 2 funnels. With all that in mind, you can do that fairly quickly. You are probably talking about a 32 knot ship. And they're built for that. Dan, I'm running behind and playing catch up, but we might get to Croydon. You never know. You always seem to be keen on Croydon as a concept, Dan. You always seem to be keen on Croydon. And by the way, Dan, check your phone if you haven't already. I'm getting messages from my sister about you. I should never introduce the two. They're having way too many conversations. And before anyone thinks it's fun things, I think they might I think she might be swapping food recipes, so this is not a good idea for anyone. Anyway, leaving that to one side. Hello AA cruisers. Well, you see, the thing is, with enough 4.7-inch guns and 4-inch guns, these cruisers can really make a difference, I feel. They can really escort convoys. Because, let's think about that. That's a vessel which is going to keep most ships away from that convoy. That also looks like a lot like a Type 1 and 2 Condottieri killer with great anti-destroyer potential. Pretty much. Now, the thing is, why have I gone for that? Well, you see, the C-Class conversion is great, but in many ways it's the only option the Royal Navy can pursue with them at the time they're pushing it. And honestly, Henderson's hands are a bit tied. The C-Class are solid workhorses, but they're smaller. And if you consider how often the C-Class end up being left alone as convoy escorts for convoys going up and down the coast of Africa, or the coast of the Indian Ocean, etc., you start to get an idea that maybe they shouldn't have had that conversion, because they're not really suited in a 4-inch gun roll for that sort of conversion. And then you look at some of the writings which Henderson and others had around the conversions, and they weren't that keen on them. Now, it's not the same problem comes with a 5-inch 38. 5-inch 38 is a very good weapon for the US Navy. It doesn't fit what the Royal Navy wants to do with their ships. Now, the 4.5-inch guns would be better, IO2, I do agree. But the trouble is, I haven't got them ready. They'd have to be deck penetrating, which means I'd have to make massive alterations to the hull and superstructure to put them in. I could on this vessel. I did consider it. But the thing is, I could do 4, probably, 2 fore, 2 aft. And I did put that cruiser together and look at it. But the thing is, then I have to transfer those guns, because they're between deck mounts, from either my carrier construction or my capital ship upgrades. I don't want to divert anything from those. So that means the 4.7s that I've got in abundance being produced for destroyers are my options. Exactly. The reason the Cs were converted was because of the problems with the Didos. And the 5.25-inch guns. And the delays in getting them into service. Excuse me a second. Okay. Why do I keep having dogs staring in my window today? Hello. Oh, you popped in again. You want to say hello to everyone this time? You're coming in this way this time, are you? Hello? Right. Okay. Oh. You've come to agree they should be called the Corgi class. Hello. You behaving yourself? What have you been up to? So yeah, why not the C-Class conversion route? Because also the C-Class are already going that route. And one of the things Henderson likes to do is have variety. And also, would the 5.25s have fitted? Probably not. Again, for the same reason. You need to have a penetrating hull mount. So, you know, these ships weren't designed for a penetrating weapon system. So basically, you just don't go with that. C-Class conversion, well, if you've got the options, go with something different. You're already converting the C-Class to this, they're going to be more than enough. Whilst having 2 twin mounts, or 4-inch guns is going to give you that coverage, and that extra firepower. The 4.7s are going to give you a lot of firepower as well. Also, oh sorry boy, you okay? Stay there. He just popped out and then he tried to pop back in again. Always get his nose caught in the door. Ay, caramba. Corgis. The 4.7 GP, if it worked out, would be really great. But the big problem with the 4.7, as it's fitted to destroyers, couldn't be able to angle high enough. Interestingly enough, and this is something which could have happened with the cruisers, because they're their value, they'd have probably worked out how to modify the mount, and you could have modified the mount. I was working this out myself the other day, so, and it was based on the stuff I did, the research. I found all the stats and measurements I'd taken when I was at Haida, and in the various books I had, and I worked out if you could have raised the 4.7-inch guns up about 1.5 inches in terms of the gun, up 1.5 inches. This is going to sound really strange. You can actually design it so it can swing lower, the breech can swing further down, and you can actually get it up to about 82 degrees. Not quite the 85 degrees preferred for high angle, but let's be honest, no one's going to complain about 82 versus 85. If there's someone standing going, I hate you, this is terrible because of 3 extra degrees, they're the sort of person who you're never going to get on side anyway. The thing is, with a cruiser like... Well, let's put this design here. With a cruiser like this being modified, well, suddenly that becomes a very different scenario. And my thinking, very much, was that what you'd have happened would be the twin, with the stack of the funnels reorientated to 2 stacks. Probably number 2 and number 4 stack positions. The bridge superstructure would be modified and raised up. You probably have 2 4.7s, 2 twin 4.7 mounts put forward. You probably have the 2 twin 4-inch mounts mounted mounted on the waist between, you know, where in the space between the funnels, about where you can see this mount up above here. And you'd have the remaining 3 4.7-inch mounts back aft, twin positions. Maybe mounted X and Y and Q, X and Y, maybe mounted in a sort of triangular, and then formation, and then you'd have the 40mm pom-poms, etc. through that. Again, 2 on the way, 2 sort of positioned on the superstructure, 1 aft on the superstructure scenario, and the 3 machine guns position, 3 quad machine guns position around as well, and the quad torpedoes somewhere on there. I toyed with various positions you could put them in, and the reality of the scenario started to get to me was it was very easy to do because I don't have to do many changes below decks. I am changing the boilers out, but that's easy. I'm just cutting up and doing that. I'm putting out some extra armor on decks, but mostly I am not changing anything. If we consider, with them carrying 8 and 9 guns, right? They're designed to carry between 1,600 and 1,800 rounds of 6-inch ammunition. Let's think about this from 4.7 and 4-inch ammunition perspective. How much of that can you draw? How much of that can you now carry? And also, they carried 3-inch rounds, and they carried 300 rounds for their AA guns. For each of their AA guns, they carried 300 rounds. So you've got 300 rounds of AA ammunition, and 1,600 to 1,800 rounds of 6-inch ammunition you are replacing in those magazines. Well, again, 10 4.7-inch guns, 4 4-inch guns, that's 2,400 rounds. If you're going for 200 rounds per gun. If you're going for 150 rounds per gun, well, you're down to 1,800 rounds. I think you can definitely carry 1,800 rounds per gun, and I'm reckoning 1,800 rounds, and I'm definitely thinking that hull, without much modification, you'll be able to carry 2,400 rounds. The 6-inch gun cruisers weren't 6-inch guns were not dual purpose, sadly enough. I do. If you had been found a couple of years earlier, you'd bet the RM would find them. Yes, you would. Hang on. Oh, yeah. The other big floppy objects did come for a whizzing past, but didn't stop. Fluffy objects coming to say hello. How does armament affect the top weight? Well, that's again the interesting thing. The 6-inch guns, they're not the heaviest ones. But one of the interesting things is the whole mount, etc., for the 6-inch gun is enough. It weighs in at 8.7 tons for the gun. Once you add in pretty much everything, you're talking about 10 tons. And if we go for the let's see, the Mark 12s, which are the standard for the Royal Navy in this period, in terms of their fitting. In full fit, they are about 4 tons. So for a twin turret, it's about 4 tons. For a single 6-inch gun and its system, you're talking about 9 tons, 9 to 10 tons. So again, it works out very, very equivalent. Albazaski, that won't work. That's far too much. And again, the 8-inch turret is a penetrating turret, and it's a huge turret. It's a huge mass. You're talking about putting it on a ship which is half its displacement. No. Yeah, there are already people, Verdan, you're quite right. 82 versus 85 degrees is an argument you find on Twitter. You would find on Twitter, but that's about the only place. So again, also, let's put it this way. If the modification gets done for this, and then they have a problem with the destroyers in combat with dealing with air attacks, what are they going to do? They've already done a modification. Those 4.7-inch guns are going to get modified within... Let's put it this way. Imagine you're a chief petty officer, you're out on a destroyer, you can't hit targets, but the cruiser, which has the same guns as you have, just has a slightly different mount, is banging away at them. You're going to look at that cruiser, you're going to look at your captain is going to say, "Carry on, chief," and in about an hour of you getting home to port, you're going to have found the necessary materials to fix it. Radar, again, I've put in place, but I haven't designed in the actual conversion because it's just being fitted at this point. So they could take radar, but I haven't added it straight off. It would pre-fit it, probably the same as the C-Class get. You know, the C-Class... Let's see, the Carlisles... they get various radar. Various radars get fitted down. Yeah, that's pretty much what you would do. You go down the Royal Navy cruiser. You know what sort of radar's available, and you just stick it on there. They might actually get the Type 280 radar as soon as they can. The Type 280 comes into service in 1940, then that's when it fitted to the C-Class, so I presume they get the same. And hydrophones, yes. There'd probably be an adapter, that would be an added inclusion. So, yeah, basically my scenario is convert this ship using destroyer engines. That's what you're pretty much doing. Yes, it's at the high end for the weight for those sets, but they can do it. Especially if you consider the Tribal had 3 Admiralty-free drum boilers to drive 2 turbine sets with 44,000 shaft horsepower. The LM class had 2 Admiralty-free drum boilers, driving 2 Parsons turbines to generate 48,000 shaft horsepower. I reckon I've got space for 4 free drum boilers to drive for the 4 turbines for 64,000 shaft horsepower, which is what I've gone for. I think the 4 Admiralty free drum boilers are certainly going to be a weight saving over the 12 Yarrow boilers. They are going to be an efficiency saving, and they are going to give you a lot of space, and also you've got a lot under construction. Hello, Fleet of Oceans. No, I am not using powdered coal. How are you doing? And just, well, Fleet's in the chat. I will remember it. I will be on Discord later. The thing I'm trying to get going is, yes, I will be appearing on Discord, and that's something I will keep going during the premieres that are going to do June and July on Thursdays. I'm glad that the Foo is here, because, yeah, Discord is fun. There's a lot of chats going there, and we're trying to work up the Discord server on this channel. So, why have I gone with what I think Henderson's version would be? Because Henderson, you have to remember, wanted to build large destroyers. He had a large destroyer, general-purpose, cruiser-destroyer dream. And him and Goodall, if they find 4 ships sitting in Pembroke Dockyard, well, A, they've got Pembroke Dockyard itself, and let's just think about Pembroke Dockyard. What's it doing in this period? It's not doing exactly as much as it could be for the Royal Navy. But it is a Royal Navy dockyard, and it had closed in 1926. And technically, the RAF Pembroke Dockyard is there. But there are still a lot of facilities there to be reactivated. And that's what they could do. They could well use the Pembroke Dockyard and the facilities in Pembroke to build these ships. The turbines and gearing would need to be changed, but it's going to need to be changed at this point anyway. Let's be honest. The turbine and gearing you're dealing with in these ships is already 20-odd years old. It needs to be changed whatever you do. One of the interesting things when I got into it was I was sort of going, well, I'm going to need to change them anyway. Okay, what can I change them into? Well, if I go with destroyer stuff, I've got more production of that going. I haven't got enough cruiser stuff going. One of the things I have got at this point is I haven't yet got the crunch on turbine construction and on boiler construction. I'm going to reach in 1941 for destroyers and sloops and all those things, which is going to lead to some fun. In 1938, I haven't got that problem, and that's the thing I'm finding in 1938. There's not just there here. There's also, if you look at this picture, it's a lovely picture I got from National Archives. You can see the big super destroyer I like to talk about. There's the L-Class 77,000 versus the L-Class 44,000. You see, these stats are for the L-Class as built. Which is why this is appropriate. This is Henderson getting a rather large ship version of the L-Class he wanted to have. That is basically what becomes a daring class destroyer. You can try like the Foo, but you're not getting me to embrace the powder coal. If you have dual-purpose 4.7-inch guns, would you even bother 4-inch guns, or would you just add another set of 4.7, adding 4 mounts and make it simple on logistics? The reason you're adding the 4-inch guns and the 4.7-inch guns is because it's technically a cruiser, and technically at this point, whilst you can make the 4.7s dual-purpose, they might not be sure. And the 4-inch guns are available. Now, yes, it might be sensible not to add the extra 4.7-inch guns, and then have a vessel which maybe is going around with, I don't know, 12 twin 4.7-inch mounts, especially if you can get them up to 82 degrees. But yeah, that would be. Let me put it this way. I went with the mixed firepower because that seemed more like a cruiser fit. And these are big enough cruisers to have a dual purpose and secondary. And if we consider the US Navy with the Atlantas went for the various types of 5-inch. So I don't see anything too wrong with it. And especially 2 twin 4-inch guns. It seems sensible. Yeah, Fleet of the Foo, please stop trying to spread the Hosh as an idea. in this channel. That's just disturbing, and I will not. I will not be supporting in any way, shape, or form. I support. I at least do not actively campaign against the Blackburn cult. Even though I do worry that someday I'm going to be having to answer some very, very long questions from someone about the UK National Census. If enough people put themselves down as cult of the Blackburn rather than Jedi, and I end up with a phone call from the BBC going, "So, what's this religion your channel has started?" And basically going, "It might be the birth of the Mechanicum, I'm not sure. They're starting out worshipping the Blackburn. How long is it before they go to full hog?" So the 4-inch guns might get removed on first refit once the 4.7 dual purpose is proven. Yes. But it could also change the entirety of the war, because again, as said, because of the space you can do this, and because it's a cruiser it's worthwhile, they do it. If you have a 4.7-inch dual-purpose conversion mount worked out already for them, then think about the tribal class destroyers. Instead of them losing losing X mount and having it turn into a 4-inch mount, it probably stays a dual-purpose 4.7. Think of all the L and M class destroyers and other destroyers which are completing World War II with 4-inch mounts to give them more capable against aircraft. If instead you can modify that to the you can just dual-purpose the 4.7, then that goes through. This is the point. If you have a 4.7 conversion already worked out, it will be quickly implemented. But it needs to be worked out and implemented. The devotions do not make me do to the Hosh what I did to that Spanish battleship you were raving about the other day. I will do it. But yes, I could see it being a scenario where they could end up with a lot of 4.7-inch guns, pretty much. Anyway, the thing is, in 1938, Henderson is still well enough to push through his vision. And Goodall is going to be around long enough to execute it. And also, there's the fact it wouldn't take that long. I was working this one out. And pretty much, I reckon the conversions would take 12 to 18 months. You could probably do 2 to 3 at a time. You could probably do all 4 at a time quite easily. There are lots of little yards around. Again, there's a lot of stuff going on about battleships. Not so much stuff going on with cruisers, especially a cruiser this size. And you could get them into service. Now, I have to admit, this is my UAD version. And my UAD version might have ended up with 10 centerline 4.7-inch guns. And about 8 torpedoes each side, 2 quadruple launchers. And possibly only needed a single stack and was getting to 32 knots. We'll leave that to one side. But that was pretty much my UAD version. And HMS Canterbury, as she was, might have wrecked a few destroyer flotillas. Oh yeah, my accountant does still get annoyed with me over the Blackburn. So, pretty much, it's going to be an interesting conversion. It's going to look something like this, but bigger. Like this, but bigger. Because, again, you're talking about vessels which are more than a few hundred tons bigger than the C-Class. C-Class Carlisle, like that one pictured on the next screen, is 5,030 tons in deep load. You're talking about a conversion which would be 6,200 tons in deep load. That's going to be quite a bit different. 1,200 tons is a lot. When it's one of those interesting things. When you're talking about 1,200 tons between battleships, that's, you know, ships which are 35, 40,000, 50,000, 60,000 tons. 1,200 tons is basically, a rounding error. When you're talking about cruisers, which are in the below 10,000 ton categories, 1,000 tons can lead to very radical differences in their size and capabilities. Nyako 4%, the solution getting down to the fired angle so easy. Why was it not done in time? Because they didn't have time to work it through and check it. It's going to sound strange, but the thing is, the modification I was suggesting you could do. And it's not completely without basis, there were proposals. But the thing was, to do it, work it out and check it, and do it all properly, they reckon was going to take 12 months. To do a radical fitting of the 4-inch guns everywhere they could, which they knew worked and knew would do the job, well, those were already available. They could start implementing those within days, if not weeks, because they had them in storage. So that's the thing. You have those guns already, you can start disseminating them. If you have the modification already worked through, you do the modification, because that'll be quicker than getting the guns and modifying all the ships. But which is quicker, if you don't have the modification worked out, doing all the development and science and testing to work out the modification, or just putting in the 4-inch gun and carrying on with everything else as it is? Which do you do? That's why I would say war is interesting, because it gives the impression of a lot of technologies being rapidly developed, but actually those technologies are just taken from development and implemented. They're not really new stuff researched, because it takes time and people. David Pierce, in 248, in terms of crew training and doctrine, would you be crewing these with cruiser folks or hyper-aggressive destroyer crew? I'd probably try a mixture of the two. I'd probably try some reservists who were former destroyer crew. I don't know if the Polish Navy would get one. Maybe they would. Maybe they'd get a D class as the deterrent. It's going to depend on how useful these things prove to be. Have you been feeding my tribals? HMS Warspite will probably just go, hello. I have some very interesting friends. Closer to the end of moving. Hopefully. 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 We're hopeful. We're hopeful soon. We've got documents to sign. I've got to get a doctor down to witness them. I've got all that sorted, then I can hopefully get everything paid for. And then if the money's gone through, then we can move. So, let's start considering again. Doubt they look exactly like the one above, but it was the closest I could produce in UAD. And, yeah, it did disturbingly well versus some destroyers. All I'm going to say is, I put it up against 4 German destroyers, and it had a wrecking good time. And admittedly, it had a veteran crew, a reservist crew, but it really did have a wrecking good time. It got damaged, please don't get me wrong, it did get damaged, but it was still floating and fighting at the end of the battle. The 4 German destroyers were not. Don't worry, Dan. We'll try and sort it out at some point. So how quickly could it be commissioned? Well, if they're found in January 1938, and that's roughly when I think he does have a visit to Wales, getting work started in March 1938, they could well be commissioned in September 1939. So, again, that's not impossible. This is a scenario where the Royal Navy could have all 4 in service in 1939 for war to begin. And convoy leadership, yeah, they could certainly do that. Imagine the East Coast convoys with one of these on them. That's a lot of firepower. And that's a lot of capability of going, oh, you've brought in some aircraft. I do not like that patch of sky. Change its colour, old boy. That's the point, really. These ships, they would quickly become, I think, whilst they might have the option of the East Coast convoys, there's also going to be the option of them doing the convoys up the coast of Africa, or even the Arctic convoys. In the nicest way, for the Arctic convoys, these would be absolutely perfect for flotilla leading duties, because, again, if you've rebuilt that structure while doing it, they then become the star, where you put the flotilla leaders in them. And again, if you've upped them to 30 knots, they can act as flotilla leaders. This is part of the reason to give them a speed increase. You could be using them as literally... The point I was sort of thinking about them was I was almost mentally thinking, well, hang on, they could become destroyer flotilla leaders. Because if you think about it, you need the destroyers. The tribals do not have a flotilla leader because, frankly, they're all big enough they can be the flotilla leaders. But this sort of ship could be made a tribal class as a flotilla leader. I think they lose all these 6-inch guns. These are the pictures of the ships which we're talking about. This is Southampton in her original 1910 Town class form. And quickly I could see them being very useful vessels. The interesting thing to me becomes, how useful are they? Because if they quickly become very useful in the war, there's going to be a potential that someone goes, we need to build something more like it. And that becomes a stronger possibility the more war goes on, I think. I think rather like the Trouble class, they'd enter the war as something which people are going, this is Henderson's pet project, it could be useful. And then a few months into the war, you go, oh, frigate, we need to build more of these, rather like the tribals. Now, in terms of tribal class flotilla leaders, you have to remember if they were used that, then they'd be things like Captain Vian would be in charge of one. Would selling old ships to breakers yards that are overcapacity and take forever to scrap ships be a treaty workaround? Potentially, if you were able to run the right breakers yard and you had the right person in charge of the breakers yard. Now, so there are options before they get in the south, right? Whether they could be used as tribal class flotilla leaders, they could be used as convoy escort cruisers, they could be used as present ships. Because let's be honest, again, they've got the range, they could be used as a present ship. They could go out and reinforce the Royal Navy in the Far East. You could have one of these end up with Force Z. You could have one of these end up with HMS Glorious. Or HMS Illustrious off Malta. I mean, off Crete. There are lots of options. But there are only 4 of them at this precise time. Now, the first thing that I think is interesting is I sort of thought, well, okay, if they come into service in September 1939, how quickly are they going to be in use? Probably pretty much instantly. What are they going to be used for? What's going to be the starting point? Probably you'd be looking at them on patrol duties. They might well be backing up some of the armed merchant cruisers and carrying out some of those duties. They would fill some of the cruiser gap in that role and backing up those ships and also being present ships. Now that could lead to an interesting thing because if we remember correctly, the Scharnhorst class do have a few other little trips out. There is the scenario when they ran into the Rawalpindi. Now, that's in November 1939. They're out to attack the Northern Patrol. Now, attacking the Rawalpindi is one thing, but if you're attacking one of these, and especially if it has... I've listed officially with 8 torpedo launchers, with 2 quads, but quite easily on a deck you can fit 4 quads, so you could have 16 torpedoes, like I did on this particular vessel. In which case, it could be a very interesting scenario for the Germans if they found themselves in a similar scenario to Rawalpindi. Now, the other scenario you have here, and it's actually more likely, is the Germans still run into the Rawalpindi, but instead of there being a British cruiser Newcastle quite far away, and other cruisers far away, there could be a cruiser nearby, because you've got these 4 extra cruisers. Recently commissioned, recently tuned up. They're perfect ships for backing up this position, so they could well be out there backing them up. So as well as Newcastle, the modern town class cruiser, there could be these other cruisers out there. And the more ships you have out there on that patrol, well, the more likely it is you have Gneisenau and Scharnhorst run into something nasty. So that's where we're starting off. What happens in the first patrols around off the coast of, in the North Atlantic? If you have extra escorts, extra cruisers, doesn't take many to cut the distance down quite dramatically. You see, the system you had was about 6 to 8 armed merchant cruisers, backed up by roughly 3 of regular cruisers backing them up at the sort of deployments. You've got an extra 4 ships attached to that duty, which is probably where these ships would go at this point. You could have 5 regular cruisers backing up those ships. If you consider your spaces goes from being 3 spread over this area to 5 spread over this area, makes it a far denser pack. And why does that matter? Because the more ships you have, the more quickly you have a response, the more likely you are to not lose Scharnhorst and Gneisenau. The more likely they are to find themselves on the receiving end of a torpedo attack. They could get so busy dealing with Rawalpindi that one of these things sneaks in and launches a storm of torpedoes. Doesn't really matter. But the reality is, this could turn this part of the campaign into a decisive battle. I'm not going to, because that's getting into an alternate history which has changed everything from the get-go. Because let's be honest, if either Scharnhorst and Gneisenau is lost in November 1939, that's going to change the entirety of history in World War II. I think what you most likely get is the Germans go, this is slightly thicker and heavier patrolled. This is more of a patrol than we were expecting. More of a presence than we were expecting. They might not even end up attacking the Rawalpindi because, you know, whilst Rawalpindi starts sending messages immediately and starts trying to send out its radio messages, they don't have much of a chance. They are a converted merchant ship. Their top speed is 15 knots. We're talking about an upgraded cruiser whose top speed is 30 knots. Yes, Gneisenau, Scharnhorst, they can outrun that. They have a top speed of 31 knots. And probably in heavier seas they have an advantage. But, and this is the crucial thing, the British cruisers don't have to keep going for that long for a capital ship to turn up. They are out there. They're out there going, hello. In November 1939, well, who specifically is out there going hello? Not any of the King George V class. I think HMS Renown is still in refit. I think she's still in refit at that point. I think it's just Repulse and Hood. And possibly Warspite. No. She had been recommissioned. Renown was recommissioned in August 1939, so she's there as well. So there's Renown, there's Warspite, there's Hood and Repulse, all out wandering. Now, the scenario, as I always said with Rawalpindi, by the way, if you remember the video I did on that, was if Rawalpindi had had torpedo launchers, she could have sunk Scharnhorst and Gneisenau. She literally gets to cracking short range with them. And when I say cracking short range, they don't open fire till they're 7.5 kilometers away from them. Rawalpindi scores direct hits, and Rawalpindi actually manages to get to the point at which she's still sailing them 12 minutes later, getting closer. The Germans retreat when they see HMS Newcastle arrive on the scene. So, as said, the scenario for the Germans at this point in war is not good if they've lost Gneisenau or Scharnhorst already. It would probably be Scharnhorst as she got closer to the Rawalpindi. And yeah, Rawalpindi having torpedoes would have changed that. But in this scenario, where you've got more of these escorts out, so that maybe not coming from as far away as Newcastle was to reinforce her. And Newcastle, this is a great thing. Newcastle is a town-class light cruiser. She has 12 6-inch guns. She gets the message, Rawalpindi is under attack, suspected by at least a German battle cruiser, because that's what Churchill ordered them defined as. Possibly heavy cruisers. Newcastle charges towards her at full speed. Doesn't hesitate. Doesn't think, I'm a light cruiser. I'm going to be completely outgunned in this fight. Nope. Enemy, charge. So again, that's what an older town class cruiser captain would have done. And the thing is, they turn up. Okay, yes, on the stats, the Scharnhorst Gneisenau should win that fight. But if they don't see them coming because of the smoke and fire from Rawalpindi, She gets in close, launches torpedoes. Suddenly you've lost the Scharnhorst class. Because it doesn't matter really if it's sunk there or then or not. If it's got enough, if it's been hit by a broadside of 8 torpedoes, it's probably sunk. If it's been hit by a couple of torpedoes, it's best it's severely damaged, at worst it's sinking. And that's going to make it kind of, that's going to leave the Germans in the scenario if we either leave this behind, or we try and tow it back, in which case we can lose both ships. Rawalpindi, I don't know about crew related to the crew related to the crew of the Iron Duke, but I do know that her captain was Captain Edward Kennedy, who was the father of Ludovic Kennedy. Of course, was a Liberal MP and a very well known naval broadcaster and author, and also a naval officer. And as a naval officer, Ludovic had served on HMS Tartar. He was a tribal class destroyer officer. And I would argue that the captain hadn't fallen far from the tree, or rather, Ludovic and Captain Kennedy were rather similar, cut the same cloth, because Captain Edward Kennedy, when the Rawalpindi charged at Scharnhorst and Eisenhower, said, "We'll fight them both. They'll sink us, and that'll be that. Goodbye." And then got on with commanding the battle. He said that to his bridge crew. Think about that. That's a strong thing to say. So, under this scenario, there is a good chance that Scharnhorst and Eisenhower ran into something a lot nastier and might have been crippled. But we can't really say. There's also a good chance that they see the level of firepower heading their way and get out of Dodge as quickly as they can. So that leads us to Norway campaign. And again, as I said they took advantage of the weight and the space of them to do the modifications to the 4.7-inch mount and make it more suitable for defending a cruiser. And, well, that's going to lead to an interesting scenario, because what it's going to mean in Norway is, if they are around, there's going to be very quickly going to be a noting of, hang on, they've got 4-inch high-angle guns, and they've got 4.7-inch guns, which go up to 82. The dive bombers are dying when they're fighting them. 3 pom-poms, 3 machine guns, all that firepower. Dive bombers are going to be having a nightmare going for these ships. No, prize money can be given out to individual ship's crews as well. It depends on the scenario. In the Royal Navy, they still retain the prize rules, they just haven't implemented them. So realistically, with Norway campaign 1940, I expect what you find is the Royal Navy quickly learns its lesson of air defence in a different way. What other changes do I think have happened? Well, you may well have a scenario, especially if they're used as tribal class flotilla leaders, that Vian uses one of them in Narvik, which would be interesting. You could also quite consistently have the scenario that these vessels are just backing up the fleet by providing extra services and extra capabilities. If their air defense systems, especially their 4.7-inch guns, turn out to start working, that's going to have a big change on the Royal Navy. As said, if you've done the modifications pre-war and they are shown to be working, then you're going to implement those modifications, because that's quicker than fitting new guns and new mounts. because everyone already has the 4.7-inch guns. They just need to make modifications to get them to work as they want them to. And trust me, this is the scenario where you hand it, if you know it's possible, you hand it over to your senior engineering chiefs, and you go figure it out. And they will figure it out. It might not look pretty, but it will work. You never know, it might end up looking pretty as well. There's always a chance. Oh yeah, if the British had captured Sharnos and Eisenhower as a prize and taken them into UK's port, that crew would have got prize money. You just know Churchill would have reinstated prize money. Even Chamberlain would have done it. And then we have the Mediterranean campaign in 1940. Now, I was thinking about this quite a bit because when on the 9th of June, if I remember correctly the date, the interesting gentleman Mussolini decides to make the transition. One of the problems the Royal Navy has is its tribal destroyers and things have all been moved out of the Mediterranean. Again, this got me to thinking about these ships, because if you've moved all those ships out of the Mediterranean because of the need for having the ships in the UK, then vessels like the C-class, or the Town class in this case, which have been converted adapted, might well have been sent back to backfill up. To, because, well, they're not destroyers, they're not cruisers, they are a conversion hybrid which gives you a lot of interesting capabilities. So you could well find them in the Mediterranean. In which case, you would have a very good AA escort for your aircraft carriers. Because, let's be honest, an aircraft carrier which has something with that level of firepower sitting alongside it is going to be feeling quite safe when it comes to air attack. Because that's a lot of AA fire. And again, as said, the 4.7-inch in this case has become dual purpose because of the modifications. Add those two things together, and suddenly Royal Navy carriers in the Mediterranean are probably sitting there pretty going, woohoo! We're having a good day. And again, if we go back to the stats on the lovely C-class, one of the scenarios you have to consider about them is their top speed is 29.5 knots. 30 knots might not sound like much of an advantage, but that's me being very, very, very conservative. We've taken the power not from 25,000 to 50,000 shaft horsepower. We've taken it to 64,000 shaft horsepower. We've taken it to more than 2.5 times the shaft horsepower. And I've taken it only up to 30 knots from 25.5 knots. I am reckoning we could be talking about a 33, 34 knot ship. Well, the Italians do have the some very interesting light cruisers, yes, which did turn into how do I put this better? Tribal class destroyer hunting targets. But we're not those might come in, but at the first point it's going to be as AA protection for the carriers. Now, going out and hunting for Italian cruisers sounds a lot of fun, and they could do that, but they would probably be more useful attacking and defending carriers. I don't think the whole lot of that. Now, Paul, you are right, but there is also something else. One of the things I included in the conversion was changing the bow and lengthening the bow and changing the bow shape. And secondly, you have to remember the Town class had one of the most overbuilt hulls known to mankind at this point. It's one of the things discussed, especially about Glasgow, when she's going through her modifications and fixings after the Battle of Coronel, that her hull is really, really overbuilt. So I think the hull with the engines changed and the bow shape modifications and improvements would be fine. You know, these are pretty well built ships. Look at this. You know, that's a well built ship. And that's, again, an advantage the Royal Navy has in this scenario, because these ships are well built. Bamas, would the shafts be replaced with more modern ones to handle that ship, sharp horsepower? Yes, but again, the thing is, and this is the point, the Tribal class, all the other ships we were talking about earlier, and this was one of the points you have to think about again with this class, which is why you can make these changes, is that these are all 2-shaft ships, including the C class. They're 2-shaft ships. So there's a limit to what they can do. These are 4-shaft ships. The 1910 Towns are 4-shaft cruisers. They're overbuilt and they're 4-shaft ships, Paul. That's why I can do this, because also, if you think about it, if you've got 4 shafts to put that power down through, you can actually spread that strain over the hull slightly more, but also, you're going to spread that strain on the shafts. Are we considering sending a Town class to South Atlantic out to Grasspega? No. I don't think these would go for that mission. As said, I could see them being used on the barrier patrol to back up the armed merchant cruisers, along with the other Town class, the 1936 Town class, which are there. I could see them being used in Norway as convoy defense and securing the convoys, and mainly working through up and down with the troop convoys and making sure they get through. And maybe backing up the destroyers in some actions. An interesting scenario none of you have brought, but I did actually think about, and did actually have, in case anyone asked me the scenario of, what happens if when the H-class flotilla go into Norway, go into Narvik, what happens if they're backed up by one of these? Now again, it's going to be in close towards torpedo range, but it's also going to massacre the German destroyers. So, yeah, we get to the Mediterranean. What are these 4 ships going to be used for? Well, again, it's 4 more ships you have. Do I think they're all going to be in the Mediterranean? No. I think you'd find one out there. And if there's only one, I can see it being used as basically dedicated carrier escort. Looking after Illustrious, looking after Eagle, looking after whichever carrier is doing the operations in the Mediterranean. And that's going to be interesting, because that's going to be a lot of firepower. If we think about the damage done to HMS Illustrious and the Battle of Crete, and her damage. Well, if we think about the ships around her, one of the things that would have been useful would have been another of those cruisers. Another cruiser to defend the carrier. If we go into force, the various forces involved, You notice very quickly there are two Queen Elizabeth class battleships, Warspite Valiant. There are G and H class destroyers and J class destroyers. The light class cruisers, Gloucester, Fiji, Orion, and Dido. Okay. Dido's an air defense cruiser. If we look at the other cruiser round, Naid, it's another air defense cruiser. And HMS Calcutta, an air defense cruiser. That's actually sunk during the operation. So we started going through it and going, well, hang on, there's only like 2, 3 air defense cruisers attached to the operations. 4 if you include Carlisle. So you've got 4 air defense cruisers attached to operations wandering around. Adding in a 5th is going to add a lot more firepower, especially if she's got a radar system. Now, the thing is, they don't get their radar till 1940. They don't get a Type 280 till 1940. But again, if we consider the British naval radars, there are some air defense radars out a bit earlier. There are. So that's the sort of the option. Type 271 is fitted in service in March 1941. Where's the earlier radar? Type 79 is probably the earliest one they could be fitted with. I wonder if they would have been fitted with a Type 79. That's first fitted to Sheffield, Rothney, and Curlew. They ordered 40 sets in 1938. So again, they could have added on sets and ordered Type 79s from the get-go for these vessels if they're being part of the conversion, because they could be built with it, installed in them from the get-go. Type 79 radar is not the greatest radar in the world. It's got about a 30 to 50 mile range. It's an early warning radar only. And it works though. It does work. They had them fitted to HMS Sheffield in September 1938. They had it fitted to HMS Rodney in January 1939. And HMS Curlew was fitted with a Type 79Z in September 1939. So yeah, they could get a Type 79. Let's be honest, the 79X have been fitted to Saltburn in October 1936, so I think a Type 79 radar is probably a sensible one, and if that's what they would have in Mediterranean 1940 at this point. You know, with these 4.7-inch dual-purpose mounts around, I wonder if the historical 4-inch Didos might receive the 4.7 dual-purpose mounts instead. They might well do. But too small for a float plane for the initial H-class attack. Yeah, I don't think they'd be carrying a float plane, but if they're in the initial attack, there is going to be a lot of 4.7-inch fire going on. Batman, Maximus. So the Town class and our Fuse class had 4 shafts. Then from the Sea class to the Dane, they have 2 shafts. Then the Emeralds bring back the 4 shafts. Yes. Well, honestly, the thing is, Michael, they are probably going to get if one of the parts of the refits is going to be a modern superstructure forward. So that's going to give you a lot of space forward. That's why you could fit the radar, etc., and things forward. So honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if they could be rebuilt as all sorts of things during the war. They might even have some ideas of the fighter. Again, because they're rebuilds, they might even get some of the ideas of fighter direction ships included from the beginning. Because the Royal Navy had ideas about that from the get-go. One of the points you have to remember from the Mark 12 guns is they were originally limited to 40 degrees. And they were enough to keep the enemy just too high for their standard standard of marksmanship, so this in Philip Vian's perspective, which did help detract from the attacks. But if you're able to raise it up, as said, higher, doesn't have to be that much, but it does have to be high enough to really cover the high angles. That's the point you want to go with. You know, 85 degrees is considered the true high angle elevation, but if you can do 82, no one's going to be complaining, as I've already said. And 82 is roughly where they thought it could get to. And as said, my maths agreed with that. So, as you notice, this is not going to be a long video this evening. That's because I thought there'd be a lot of the questions at the end of a bit of discussion. But also because it changes a lot of history. It's one of the things that people are probably wondering is, why don't I go on past 1940? Because there's two scenarios I really see happening in this. One of them is the Royal Navy decides to order a whole suite of these. And a whole suite of larger cruisers get ordered. And by larger cruisers, by sort of, well, larger sort of destroyers / cruisers really get ordered. And I have various ideas for what these would be. I truly do. But to highlight it, I have to be very careful about what I do next. Because what I'm going to do is shift things a little bit. Just a tad. And hope it all works. Which I had set up for it to work. This is something I haven't done on this scenario and this setting before. Or at least if I haven't done it in a long time. Because usually I'm gonna put two of those and two of those together. Okay. So, let's see if this works, he says. Let's see if this works. There's always a possibility it doesn't work. Hello. Yes, it's working. Hopefully you're still hearing me, and you're hopefully hearing me talking away, because that is the plan. The plan is, rather like with a Twitch stream, I'm going to do some design work for you to talk through, because, see, my thinking is if these cruisers really work, the Royal Navy's going to go, right in with the tribals, we want some more of this. And the whole purpose is going to be designing something which is less than 6,000 tons and quick to build. So, for starters, we have to sort of think about what kind of cruiser hull are they going to go for. These are all kind of big for what we're looking for. Advanced scout cruiser might do. We probably want it to be 37 knots, or at least 36 to keep up with destroyers. And we will leave it at about, we'll aim for 7,500, okay? Again, we're going to have veterans because that's the scenario we're in. With the Royal Navy, we have the advantage of having very, very good crews. Modern armour, triple hull, reinforced bulkheads, anti-flood, all those systems are nice things to have. And, well, let's start thinking. Now, engine-wise, do I want natural boilers? Do I want forced? Forced will do me. Rangefinders. Why is that taking my weight over so massive? Oh, I'm really high on the weight. Oh, yeah, that's why. I've got a massive range. And I probably want that. And I'm probably going to have to up this to about 8,000 tons, aren't I? That'll do. That will do. Still overweight. Wow, what am I doing that's so overweight? Double hulls, I think. Let's give it that. Take that down to that down to that, and we'll have a look at the guns. So yes, the thing is, I'm trying to design this as the Royal Navy would in this period. So we've gone for a very utilitarian, every option's as utilitarian as possible. We're going with our trusty. Now at this point, I've got the 4.5s, or I've got to go to the 4.7. If I'm going to go for the 4.5, which I can do, but of course I've been doing everything with 4.7 beforehand, so it might be tempting to go to 4.7. But let's go 4.5 and see how long we can make them. Torpedoes. There we go. Now got 16 torpedoes. We want secondaries. We want the 40mm, don't we? The fact I can't fit any back here, but I can fit them on here, it always amazes me on this design. Not sure what's wrong with that pattern. But yes, we're quite heavily overweight at the moment. And if I take the engines down to induced, or balanced, induced is fine. I'm going to need to up the main belt. Why is the forebelt quite so heavy compared to the rest of the ship? Getting a 4-inch main belt. 2-inch deck. That's fine. Aft weight is still massively overweight. And we can put in probably for yep. And secondary guns. I'd like to go down there, but they're going to drop down to 1.5 inch anyway. I've got to drop those down to 3 inches of armour, 3 inches on the top. More than I normally give it, but you know, I'm being generous. And I think I'm going to have to fix the forebelt weight offset issue. Forebelt down to 1. Pump that up to 2. And this is the joy I love about this game, I have to admit. You do have to spend quite a lot of time balancing things like the weights. That should do. Oh, there you go, balanced. And a few hundred tons to spare. So what should we do? I'd say I want to increase the capability of my turrets. I want a standard ratio, an increased HE ratio. I want the best shells I can get to fire. I'm gonna go for triple base because that's safest. But that low. I don't care about the cost. It's not a long-term game. Increased ammunition, standard shell size, of course. 18-inch. Well, I've got 21-inch torpedoes, of course, because I'm British. Standard reloading. Should I get? Oh, I can go auto. Okay, I've gone auto. I'm going auto. Anything else I want to do to reinforce the ship? Because I've got 180 tons to play with, so 180 tons. What should I do with 180 tons? That's too fast for the hull. Make the hull narrow, saves a lot of weight. It's fine at the moment. That takes it overweight if I'm going to 36 knots. If I'm happy with 33 knots, then I can do it quite happily. If I want to make it a little bit fatter, I can. And that gives me a few advantages. 12,000 kilometers is a fairly decent range. And that's 12,000 kilometers, roughly fits with the Royal Navy description of these things, because if we go down the stats, it should, he says, it should have propped into roughly 84,000 shaft horsepower, 33 knot speed, Liverpool class. We're going to rename this, of course, though. This is going to be the Corgi class, because it's got to be Corgis. And, yeah, they're, let's see, cruising change. Cruising speed, 22.9 knots, that'll do. They always do make a mess out of what actually happened. But the point is, this is you building a cruiser-destroyer fusion based on the fact of the experience of that cruiser, of that ship. Now, there is one thing I've left out of here. And that's the fact the Royal Navy did experiment, of course, with triples. And there you go. You now have 14 guns. Halfway offset, 1.6%. That's a little bit too heavy on my liking. That's a little bit too heavy. Foredeck just up a bit. That'll do. So, let's go see what our opponent is going to be. And I'm just going to say this now. Put in and get a nice little sort of poll for you all. Who should design the German destroyer? Alex or AI? There is a whole sort of fun thing with the turrets, and I do point this out. Whether or not they should be called triples or threes, etc., what they should be. The point is, some navies use it really interchangeably. Some people would say triple, if it's a triple, or it's twin, it's automatically a link system. But then you have a double or a trio as individual gun turrets. Or two or three, and as a whole debate between different navies. And also some navies, what they refer to it, they change their phraseology at different times. No triple in the middle, no. .21-inch torpedoes were what they produced. So I kept it historically accurate, and I added in the triple 4.5 inches because they were looking at that as an idea. So, apparently, at the moment, I'm designing it. We'll see. There's a couple more minutes. I'm going to let the sort of the display go on for a little bit longer. And decisions have a little bit longer to work it out. Because this is the fun with alternate histories. Hybrid destroyer. Now, yes, I've pulled ahead at the moment. So, that could be fun. That could be fun. In fact, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to say, I'm going to end it in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And I'll wait for that to be broadcast before I do actually end the poll. And we'll see who's won. And it looks like I've won with 66% of the votes. So, what am I building? What am I building? That's a good question. What am I building? Let's go for a Naval class. AK at a Type 1936A. Destroy, well... Yeah, Type 1936A is what we're going to use as a basis. Which were 2,700 tons in standard. So... we'll go for a slightly bigger design. They had a top speed of 36 knots. They were powered by steam turbines, 2 shafts, etc. So yeah. I'm going to give them geared turbines. Oil. About that should be representing their sort of scenario. Diesel auxiliary system, yes. Armor, they were about that level. Gonna give them that, because I'm nice. Right then, let's go for main tower. It doesn't look too dissimilar to a German ship. Okay, so they are armed with... let's go for 1 twin, 3 single, 5.9 inch guns. So, main guns. A twin. And we basically go, right then, funnels. Oh, I do find it sometimes fun with the funnel design. The German ships are fun on the funnels anyway. Why would I want a funnel looking that way? Okay, historically they have they have their torpedoes down there. And again, they get 21-inch torpedo tubes. Historically, they're sat down there and there. Then there's the secondary tower structure. And the 5.9-inch guns. Funnels. I'm going to have to do some modifications of where I'm putting these guns, I do realise. Principally because it just won't let me put them where they went historically with the designs they're giving me. It's almost as if they don't like the Germans. Ay, caramba. 5. inch gun, center there, and one down there. So let's take them up to 5.9. And these are... Oh, that was not liking that, is it? If I move that forward, and that to there, and that's all happy. Rangefinder, I'm going to give them this. Acoustics, they are German ships. That's about equivalent, actually. And it's good quality radar, but it rarely works. So, and on their destroyers, it's terrible in terms of reliability because it's very complicated and they don't mean it requires so much to maintain it. So, I'm gonna give them Gen 2. I'm gonna be nice. I'm gonna give them 21-inch torpedoes because they had those. Decent shells, yeah. Barbettes, yeah. Engine efficiency is at 214%. So, I don't need that. I can move that back. I should probably try and put some secondaries on them, but honestly, no, those guns would not be any use in a standard fight, and I don't feel like being that cruel. And now I've got to work out on stabilizing this vessel, so let's start with some armor, shall we, which they didn't actually historically have. I can get to 1.1 inch main belt and a 1.1 inch. Has that helped anything in any way, shape, or form? Probably sort of. My coach, if the world finds out how the outlines of refitted towns, how does it impact the other nations' build programs designs? Probably not a jot, because A, there's not much they can do, and B, this is 4 ships being modified. That's really not going to be... That's not enough ships for them to modify to start making major changes based off it. I think that's going to have to do for my Type 1936... Sort of. As in, SO, sort of. So. Let's up their guns as much as we feel like being helpful. But that pushes pitch. This is the trouble. I don't want to add on weight because, honestly, it adds on pitch issues. And I can't do more than I have done. Oh well, let's see. These have got a range in the gunfire of 14.8 kilometers. Okay. These have got a range of 19.6 kilometers. They have a range of 15.8 kilometers. They have a range of 15.8 kilometers, so the torpedoes are exactly the same range. That drops the range when increase their speed. That increases their range. Drops their detection range. Ooh, takes them up to 74 tons. Half weight offset. If I go for oxygen torpedoes. I'll just go standard. I'm going to be nice. I'm going to be nice. Now, I should check before I get them that the guns are remotely speaking accurate. So the German 5.9 inch guns were there. again, this is the point at which it's always good to have calculators and always good to have these things to check out. So they are a 14.91 centimetre. .165 divided by 100. Hang on. So 14.91 centimeters is, yeah, divided by 149. Let's just do that. 48. So they're 48 cal weapons. They should be. They're a 5-inch 38 and the 5.9 38 gun. That's roughly right. They're a 4.5-inch 40 gun. That's roughly not right, but it'll do. Let's launch and see, shall we? Let's see. So basically, in this scenario, we're looking at what the Royal Navy might have decided to build. And yeah, we're going to have this going off. I'm not sure how this is going to display on the screen for you all. I hope it's all good. There are 4 German destroyers and 2 cruisers, and I am not going to get involved in the fighting at all other than setting speed. I'm letting the AI guide it. So let's see. As you can see, these have got 4 triple mounts and 2 twin mounts. Well, 4 triple mounts and 1 twin mount. So they have 14 guns each. A slight range advantage, not much of one, but they are going at their cruising speed, and that which should be best for their gunnery. And yeah, they're already firing away. The Germans have 5.9-inch gunship, 5.9-inch guns. The British have 4.7-inch guns, 4.5-inch guns. And if that doesn't work, we can always try the 4.7 and see which would have been a more sensible solution. Whether the 4.7-inch gives an advantage over the 4.5-inch, that would be actually conclusive. Launching torpedoes at maximum range is always a gutsy manoeuvre. It's HMS Corgi and HMS Penguin, apparently. Which is... So send penguins, you are in the game. That's good. Glad it's coming through fine. The Germans are really trying to pour fire into HMS Corgi. I personally wouldn't if I were them. Corgis are known to react unpleasantly when they attacked. But one of the interesting things that's noticing to me is that the guns aren't really firing back. I'd say the guns, in terms of the Corgis, have the range necessary to engage, but the Germans are hanging out. Well, see, they're within gun range, so those guns should be firing. But they're not. I'm not sure why that the answer is. The Germans are really trying to push it here. Their destroyers are really doing interesting. They out of torpedoes already. I think they are. And they've got nearly 6-inch guns, so those are what you design to take out light cruisers. V2 is out of them. Again, it's so strange, the rate of fire. Am I the one who's not seeing the 4.5-inch guns firing? Really interesting question scenario here. Why are the 4.5-inch guns not firing? Yeah, the percentage length change can be interesting. Reload time is about right. Honestly, not great. They're doing a good job avoiding the German torpedoes, which are mostly fired at long range. I think the Germans are now out of torpedoes, and I don't think they've scored a single torpedo hit. Which is useful. Definitely. So let's see what the AI comes up with this scenario. Because I would suggest the 4.5-inch guns should be enough to clobber these destroyers. The sheer volume of them. Because there's 28 4.5-inch guns on that side. And there are 20 5.9-inch guns on this side. So whilst they're not as different as necessarily I might like to presume... 10.3 rounds a minute. Rate of fire 9.61 rounds a minute. Again, it seems a bit low. But it's a triple mount, so that could well be affecting it. Yeah, the AI doesn't like close range. As gunnery platforms, though, the cruisers are more stable than the destroyers, so they should be giving them a bit of a bashing. Although accuracy appears to be way off. Let's see, what's causing the accuracy issues for my ships? Maneuver, calm wind, smooth waves, engine vibrations. Guns are different barrels. Hey, one of the German destroyers has sunk due to heavy flooding. There again, that's not too dissimilar than some of the exercises I ran with the older adapted version of this. Which, and this is the point with UAD, I sometimes do individual ones like this, and then I'll use it to help me refine the programming for what I put into my harpoon system. Which is something which I'm going to show you once I have far, far better systems set up to support it all. Basically, I need a computer which is going to have a lot more fresh air. And, Penguin has been lost. That's annoying. Corgi's getting damaged. But she has no torpedoes left. That's annoying again. It's sort of in a death spiral. 5.9-inch guns, when it's calm seas and they're actually allowed to hit things, really does help. I have been seeing that UAD will... Corky's sunk as well. Goodness gracious me. Okay, right, and we're going to go to the drawing board, aren't we? So let's go... No, let's go design ship. And let's get rid of that for starters. And let's up the guns to 4.7. How does that do range-wise? Still, AP range is that. Ship is overweight. So, let's go for... What exactly shall we go for? This becomes a tempting question. Gun reload time. 6.6 seconds. Why is that so high compared to the other? We've got a veteran crew. That should be down like anything. Right, what else do we need to do to really help this vessel out? that. And if I move that to there, move that up a bit, bring that up to there, then I've saved quite a bit of weight. 4 weight is off the charts, but the thing is, I can do things with this. I can move this back as well. So half weight is now at 4.6%. Now, why am I doing this? Because I can bump up some of the armor. I can bump up the forward belt to equivalent to the aft deck, to the aft belt. And I can bump up the main deck a bit. Drop that down a tad. Drop that down a tad. Drop that down a tad. Let's see what we can do to... I need to lose 60 tons. I'm always having to lose 60 tons. That's no point. There's no point in that. There's no point in that. They just about have a point with their size. If I take that down to 2... that should speed them up again in operations. And I'm now not enough down. I need to drop something else which is costing me weight. What do I want to drop? What do I want to drop? And believe it or not, this is not that dissimilar to what they had to do at the time. This is a real sort of consideration of, they might have gone, well, you know, can I drop something? What can I drop? What is sensible for me to drop? That takes me down to it. I know you can choose different range, but I'm trying to be historically accurate, David Pierce. So that's the thing is, I don't want to go with unhistorical. So I've gone with the historically accurate, what they were using at the time. So they're... that one's a good one, but it does reduce a gun accuracy, a gun range, but does increase gun accuracy. Cordite is a good example. That increases gun range, reduces shell penetration, increases shell damage, increases shell weight, shell cost, all these things. So each one of these have a scenario, but basically what you're dealing with in terms of the Royal Navy at this point is mostly a smokeless powder. And the closest equivalent to a smokeless powder they have here is that one, in its terms of performance capabilities. Yes, but I'm using 4.7 triples. So to get them up to their historic standards, you tend to have to add in more because UAD does funny things. The twins might have better rate of fire, but that's also going to up my weight in other ways. But let's see. Trouble is, that takes me for the same barrels, gets me to 270, to 8,270 tons, which is overweight. Same range, rate of reload for time goes down, so the rate of fire is going to go up. Should probably match in against the Germans at that point. Now I need to find 110 tons. That was some quick maths in my head. That was some real quick maths in my head. So there you go. Right, now we've got a version which is not too dissimilar to some of the ideas put forward for Dido improvements, let's be honest. It really isn't. And twin. Full weight offset to 8.2%. That's more of a problem. Okay. That's getting closer to what I like it to be. Also increasing weight. I prefer not to increase weight. Foredeck down to 1 inch, forebelt down to 1 inch. And main deck to 4.1 inches. That's gonna have to be it, because honestly, we'll see how that goes. Let's launch and see what happens, shall we? Yes, they are supposed to be triple, but the Royal Navy still experimented with the idea, so I thought I'd try out the idea. And there's always a scenario in this one where they think it would work. Corgi and Terpsichore. We haven't adapted. The German ones hopefully are the same we came up with last time. Not something the UADs come up with. Yeah, they are. They are the same. So let's see again how these destroyers would work, how these cruisers would work. Because that's basically the idea is that you've gone with, instead of building sort of things like the Daring class, etc., you've gone, right, we're going to keep building fleet destroyers, but we're now going to build small cruisers, which are designated destroyer leaders, with destroyer weaponry. So if you sort of think about the tribals are reaching up, these are sort of reaching down, and going from that different angle. So each one now has 12 rather than 14 guns. They're 4.7 rather than 4.5. And they're in 6 twin mounts rather than 4 or triple and 1 twin turret. Let's see what happens. Terpsichore is one of the 9 muses, lyric, poetry, and dancing. Ah, yes, we know. Oh, well, the Royal Navy does like its Greek names. None of their ships appear to be suffering that much in this fight. And this is really interesting, because in the older ones set in 1939, this was literally a vicious fight and the cruisers kept coming out on top. In the later ones, putting this into position in 1943... I would say what I'm finding interesting is the 5.9-inch guns. I think I've done almost too good a job making them actually stable. The Germans are launching a lot of torpedoes. Why is it the AI will run everything apart from smoke? You have to keep reminding it to turn on smoke generators. Tevsky has already lost her captain. She's flooding. This is intriguing to me. It truly is. But it's also the joy of one of the reasons why you do this level of testing and why you do these sort of things as a historian when you're doing alternate histories. Because you can have all sorts of ideas of how things should work, and then you test them and go, it's not working, what's the problem? And then, of course, you have to figure out whether the problem is you and your ideas or the software you're using for testing. In this scenario, I'm wondering if they're giving too high a stability factor to these destroyers. Yeah, they're stable. They're solid as a rock, which is completely unlike the German destroyers of the period. And that could be what is different. Ooh, I wonder if that's the thing. Amazing. You fix the stability issues on German destroyers. The 5.9-inch gun, of course, is a 6-inch gun. It turns into an absolute killing machine for for cruisers. There you go. Case in point. Which is, of course, the whole argument for the 5.9-inch gun. But the reality was, the 5.9-inch gun wasn't up to the standard. The ships weren't able to operate it, and weren't able to do this. Really interesting. Okay. Switching gears, how do you wargame ships formations which have not yet been designed, e.g. the US carrier video doctrine? You start giving out parameters, and you start working out what parameters, and then you wargame the parameters. So basically, you arbitrarily assign the parameters and find out how it does, and then find out how you need to fix it. So that's pretty much what the Americans did. They were wargaming based on... And they plugged in the parameters based on what they thought Langley was going to be available to, and this is then they made an assessment with Langley as their baseline. So I'm going to go back, and I'm going to fix something for accuracy's sake. I'm just going to see whether my suspicion of what's happening, whether I have in my desire for accuracy and for being nice to the Germans have actually been too nice to them. So if I take that down to 0 and that down to 0, that probably becomes more accurate. Do that as well. And I gave them veterans, and honestly I should probably give them regular. And let's launch and see what happens. A 6-inch the 6-inch gun on tribal hull will not have worked. It's basically the whole reason the Royal Navy did look at all the various gun fits you can put on the tribal class destroyers, and they decided, oh great, and now it's a scenario like this, which is reduced visibility range anyway. The British looked at it and decided that that wasn't going to be stabilized enough for firing. It just wasn't going to be stabilized enough for firing. You know, it wasn't going to give you an accurate enough targeting. The Germans decided to put 5.9-inch guns on them because it gave them the maximum hitting power they could put in. But the trouble is you then have to hit the target. And with destroyers, it's very much rate of fire is how you hit the target. Now, with light cruisers, of course, usually you've got 6-inch guns to do the things, but I've gone down to 4.7-inch. So that's the thing. Their range has dropped off, but their accuracy should have gone up because they're a far more stable hull than the 4.7-inch was actually initially designed for to achieve accuracy. Oh. And yeah, I think I was right in my strong suspicion. At least I proved another theory, that if the Germans had been really thinking through their gun design, instead of going for a super fast, sleek hull that was going to maximize speed, they needed to go for a hull which maximized stability if they were going to use 5.9-inch guns, and if they had done that, they might have had a truly durable weapon. But I might be crying too soon, but I have a feeling I'm not going to be. I have a feeling I have both inadvertently just proved my theory about, well, I need to do a lot more simulations to really prove it, about German destroyer design, and also prove that this would have worked under the rights if the Germans had kept up their destroyer design. My coach, the problem with Alex designing German ships, there aren't 6 other competing voices all insisting their area of interest is key and must be included. That's why they're historical results. There's also the fact that I have an inherent bias towards building stable ships. After having grown up with a father and other family members involved in ship design, the whole concept of building a vessel which is rocking around quite so much as those destroyers are rocking around right now is obscene to me. The Germans have any sort of plating destroyers? Not really. Basically, you have to remember the Germans are designing their guns in millimeters, not inches. So for them, a 5.9 is 150 millimeter. And 100. Remember, that's why the limit goes up to 6.1 to allow the French to put 155s in that. There were designs using 5.25-inch guns, but the Royal Navy didn't go further than having the designs. They did the designs and worked it out and went, no. Yeah. I think the trouble, O2, is exactly that. I think yeah... that basically I did. I let my natural inclination towards not liking instability lead to this, because this is what's happening now, and this is not even a fair fight. This is not even a kind fight in any way, shape, or form. Corgi and Hermione are pretty much just going, hello, we're having fun in the fog, almost bashing into each other. We're here. Yes, we honestly are here. We're smoking currently at the moment. But this is not going to be a short... This is going to be a short-term engagement. It's rapid-fire guns combined with stability of hull in taking those guns, and yes, you have this result. They are facing against true machine gun cruisers with 12 4.7-inch guns. I could probably redo this now, and my 14 4.5-inch gun on all the other ships would be massacring them. Because, yeah. There we go. There we go. So, yeah. It's fun sometimes. It truly is. You do all this stuff and you think, what have I done this time? What I done that time was tried to be too perfectionist. And again, this is a real problem again when we are doing alternate history, when we're doing historical analysis and we're using advanced tools like this. The humans can cause the trouble, as just demonstrated there. My inclinations, my tendencies are the things which cause the problem or results, not the reality of the history. If I'd interpreted it correctly. But what I'd done was, automatically, my own biases, I'd gone, must fix that, must have those ships, those destroyers stable. And that, of course, made the 5.9-inch work as it should have done, as the Germans wanted it to. Which actually does present a whole thing. If the Germans had done that from the get-go, they could have had a very different scenario in World War II. It could have been far tougher for the British. I still think the British destroyers would have had the edge, because a destroyer manoeuvres a lot faster than a cruiser, but a lot of smoke and water. Right then, so, questions. Now, and I will say, okay, just a second. Ouch. Okay. How is everyone doing? Questions? If I look slightly different, I've just done a slightly overreaction, I think, but there was... Okay, look. I read... I saw the... didn't see the full stop. And so I read that my MOT service on Saturday for my car was going to cost $5,000. And then I looked at it properly and went, oh, it's 500. Okay, that's fine. But for some reason, they only had one dot after the 100. What I mean is they didn't have it. It didn't go double dot, and you know, so usually it goes. You'd expect in sort of similar to go 500, and then dot, you know, the full stop, and then decimal point, and then two zeros. But they only have 3 zeros on there, and the dot is the decimal point between, you know, number 30 and number 20. So yeah, that's 500 is still a lot of money, but let's be honest, that's not like $5,000. $5,000 would have been a case of, oh frigate, that car's gone. At this moment, current time, moving house, there's no way I'm spending $5,000 on my car. As much as I love my little car, no. It costs me less than $2,000 to buy. There is no way I would spend $5,000 on servicing it. And please note again, that is the rule of thumb. If anyone needs to do it, if they're looking after their car and they get a bill, if servicing the car is more expensive than getting a new car, get a new car. And whatever you do, do not buy on tick. Seriously, I consider cars on loans and interest to be the quickest way to get yourself into trouble, because they are quite literally a depreciating asset. In that you're using them and wearing them away, whilst also paying for the price you pay, paying interest on the price you originally paid for them. That does not seem like a good idea to me. That is not a good idea to me. Oh, and I've just finished my Amber as well. I'm down to my last bottle. Oh, frigate. That's right. Why were only 2 colliers built pre-World War I for the Royal Fleet Auxiliary? Think about where the Royal Navy needed to operate, and also you don't coal ships at sea. So most of the Royal Navy's colliers or collier needs are taking the coal from base to base, and it's coaled in harbour or coaled in base. So you can hire merchant ships for that role. So you don't need to have the RFA. The time you need the RFA colliers is for when you want to do resupply at forward positions or positions which are high risk. And again, you don't need that many. For the American Navy, they needed them because, let's put it this way, the American Merchant Marine was not as big as the British Merchant Marine, and so the US Navy had a harder time hiring ships to do the transfer. In fact, usually they ended up hiring British merchant ships to do the transfer. Bagmaster, just imagine these crews are scored in 4C. Well, that's the point, really. The point, really, about these 4 ships is they're not going to change the war massively. They're not going to make its history change completely. There is that potential with Scharnhorst and Gneisenau. If you have these out, maybe a ship with torpedoes gets closer. Potentially that does have a long range, has a whole riveting impact. But Scharnhorst and Gneisenau getting damaged with Rawalpindi, as we've discussed before on this channel, has a massive impact because, well, if you have either one of those out, if they get if one gets sunk, then you have only one left for Norway. Well, is that going to make the Germans feel less confident about mounting Norway? Maybe they still do it, maybe they don't. If they still do it, what does that does that lone one, let's say it's Gneisenau left, run into Renown on her own? Well, that's going to change the scenario even more, because if it's Renown versus Gneisenau 1v1, okay, that's 9 11-inch guns versus 6 15-inch guns, and yes, Gneisenau's probably still ordered to run, but that's going to be only 3 11-inch guns rather than 6 11-inch guns firing back at Renown, versus 4 15-inch guns firing forward. Suddenly it changes things up. There's all sorts of history which can change with the inclusion of a couple of small ships. And again, these ships are likely to end up in secondary theatres as general-purpose maids of all work, doing all sorts of duties. So they could end up with 4C. A couple of them could end up there. Because they'd be fast enough to keep up with the fast capital ships, and they look. You could say you're giving them good ships which can make up for destroyers and in their number and AA cruisers, and that's going to give you extra firepower for air defense. Car is an expendable tool. Yes, pretty much. I will be going to Discord chat in a bit, but I'm just going to answer some questions here first. iPhone, I moved to Spain years ago. Here they use a comma instead of a decimal point. Freaks me out at times when I think I'm about to build thousands. Yeah, let's put it this way. I just realised, I then looked at the video and sort of saw the video came up on the small screen as well. And I did an entirely comic over perhaps reaction, but it was literally a case of, what? Is that £5,000? And they go, £500 is enough at the moment. Frankly, that's not fun, but that's doable. That's going to be tight but doable. And the reason it's tight at the moment, as everyone knows, as anyone who's ever moved house will know, is there is just money hemorrhaging everywhere. There are people... I even got a letter the other day, and I kid you not, I'm not sure how to show this without showing details. But if I do that, so I don't show off my address... I've got even the US Tax Office, apparently, sending me documents to try and ask me for money. Yes. US source income subject to withholding. Now, I have to admit, this particular lovely 104 S-S23 form is going to my accountant to A, check out if it's real, and B, sort out if I need to do anything about it. So I will just leave that in their capable hands. But B, when you move in house, everyone seems to want your money. It's not fair. Moving house does not make money. No one, please, no one go away believing that. Moving house costs money in every way, shape, or form. It will hopefully be a far greater improvement. I'm gonna have a far bigger office. I'm gonna have a far more space in my car. I'm gonna be in Cornwall, which has far more of my family around. I'm hopefully going to therefore be able to develop something akin to a social life. I'm going to be far further away from the UK National Archives, which is going to be really annoying. So that's probably going to involve regular trips to Kew. And those are probably going to have to be overnight stays. So yeah, there is Dan Freeman already in the chat. Yeah, he has very kindly offered. I've already made a mental note that I will not abuse that offer too often. But yes, moving costs huge amounts. Didn't know you're American. I think it's because of the way YouTube and etc. other incomes through that system. I think it's YouTube and Twitch. I think the Americans are after my money. Yeah. Yeah, this is the thing. I could have got it lasered off for about privately for about 150 to 250 pounds per treatment, and they reckon it would take 3 to 4 treatments. So yes, this is why I'm trying Bazooka Dat Veruca, as it's always been advertised, and we're going to see if that works. And if that doesn't work, then I'm going to wait for hopefully NHS. Thomas Clarke, luckily the problem for my family and relationship breakdown is that the people I'm moving with are my mother and sister. The relationship might have broken down, but we can't get rid of each other. It's family. Down here, I'd be offended to say if you paid to stay anywhere. Whilst I understand and accept that, there are going to be... I am going to even it out, because I don't like abusing friends by taking up too much of their spare rooms. I'm fairly sure it's YouTube. It's basically YouTube, Patreon, all these things. I just hand the form to my accountant, and my accountant goes, "Oh, you really are interesting, aren't you?" Have I seen the Patreon suggestions? Not yet. I'm hoping to tomorrow finish recording Saturday's video, finish recording Friday's video, which I'm going to re-record tomorrow morning. And, because I've got the Key Aircraft video tomorrow evening, that's for Friday. And, also finish recording the final June Patreon premiere. Yes. It's fun figuring out how to make it so Dr. Lark can't pay you back. Yes, the fact that you've worked out that PayPal doesn't allow me to figure that one out, I will work it out. I will work out ways. I will figure out other ways of paying you back, Jack Ray. Don't worry, I have plans. There is currently a suggestion going around of a special event which I might be invited to in America, and if I do, there are a couple of people who are on the list of people to be invited. Seeing as both me and Drac might be invited if it does happen, and it's very, very early stages, so please don't hold us to it. I think it's fairly safe to assume the other two from the shipshape crew will be invited along. And basically it'll be a case of anyone who's American, Canadian, wants to come see us, we'll be there and we'll make sure you get tickets. And have a lovely time, and I will buy you some dinner. Oh, Thomas, don't worry, my accountants. I have an absolutely wonderful firm. If anyone is an academic who has trouble with with earning money from multiple organizations, because I also have money coming to me from USNI, because my book was published by both them and PayPal, pen and sword, so it's double published, and all these things, etc. You know, the money coming in. They are able to deal with the fact that I have multiple universities paying me money. They're able to deal with YouTube, Twitch, all these things. I give them the account and money. I give them all the details coming in. If a university hasn't sent me the correct forms, they go and get them off the university. They're happy to deal with American everything. They are an absolutely brilliant accounting firm. They are used by so many academics. It's almost a joke. They're pretty much they do everyone's accounts, but they do seem to be used by a lot of academics who have the similar problems as me. And yeah, I can't say anything better for them. They do cost roughly £350 a year. You have to pay them for roughly £350. But the thing is, frankly, for that, they deal with all the stress, and I, unlike my dad, do not end up in trouble. My dad always believed he could do the forms himself. And my dad, several occasions, ended up with gentlemen from the tax office visiting him because he'd made mistakes. So I took from that, you know, there are a couple lessons I picked up from my dad. One of them was, know your own limitations. And whilst I'm very good at government paperwork and dealing with all those things, I am very sure when it comes to tax coding, I do not know it well enough. It is specialist enough, it is complicated enough, I want to get it right. So I outsource that. And yes, it costs me 350 quid a year, but that is 350 quid a year I pay without feeling even the remotest pang. My Scottish and Cornish ancestry does not even raise a small little murmur at that payment. That goes through, and the lovely lady named Anu and Katie and all the other rest of the team, who are absolutely excellent team of accountants, deal with my issues. Speaking of that, Katie emailed me the other day going, have you got this year's details? Yeah, this for 2023's accounts. Okay. Don't worry, Stafford. That sounds cool, Leslie. I look forward to that one, and I also look forward to looking at the Cove, which you reckon the French would have tried to line in for Newcastle. I think they'd have got massacred. I'm not sure. Oh, you really are interesting, aren't you? Is a good thing, given how on earth it's almost as bad as it's fun. With my family, fun and interesting are two words which you have to listen to the intonation of. It's a leg, and my mum says this as well. She has, oh dear, isn't that interesting? Versus, that's interesting. And really, how interesting. And all three of those, they sound the same word, but they carry very different meanings. And at least one of those, you want to back out the room as quickly as possible with your eyes focused on her, smiling as you leave. Making sure to do no sudden movements. Diamond Masters, if the triple 4.7-inch cruiser you designed had a squadron at Garden Canal, how do they fare in the battles? Could be interesting. They could have a very high rate of fire, especially if you design the turrets properly. But they're not going to have the range of 6-inch or 8-inch cruisers. So, but against the destroyers, they could prove very nasty. Knights of everyone, would it be right to think the JMS-SDF could have gotten the 2 Atago class DDGs and 8 Taco class Ds instead of one or the other? If they wanted to spend the money, yes. And I say different. If the Japanese got their KOSAG, so that's combined steam and gas and turboelectric drive propulsion system idea to work, would it become standard on James Tier ships post 2000? I think it would have still been a gas turboelectric drive post 2000 because let's be honest, gas turbines just so much more power dense. Ronan, wait, you're coming stateside. There is a potential possibility, something in the works, which you might hear more of over the next few months, and it will be later this year, if it happened, and it will be a highly special thing. But we're waiting to see. It might become something we need to organise a campaign for it to take place. They're getting basically the Japanese destroyers and light cruisers will be getting covered in 4.7-inch shells. If their heavy cruisers are there at Guadalcanal, then there's a problem. But I think it's going to be a lot of shells. For the USN, out of G3, which is the bigger threat? The G3. The N3 is scary. Don't get me wrong, but the South Dakotas and the N3s are gonna match up, and it's gonna be a fight. A half a dozen one, 6 of the other. 9 18-inch guns versus 12 16-inch guns, and both roughly the same speed. The N3s have the advantage in armor, but yeah, it's still going to be a slogging match. It's the G3s with their 16.5-inch guns. They're going to walk through Lexingtons like they're not there, and Lexington's going to be the only thing the Americans have that can catch them. And B, they are going to be everywhere around their trade. And if you add them with Hood, Renown, Repulse, and Tiger, yeah, that scenario is not good for the Americans. And I'm not sure the RM was saying the G3s had 7-inch belt when that was the deck armor, because I'm not sure where you're hearing that said. The stats I've got for the belt armor for G3 from the picture I have of the book, which is in one of these boxes up on the screen, but I have the picture of the page of the book for the G3s up. I grabbed it up. Is they had 12 to 14 inches of belt armor, depending on spacing. The deck armor varies between 3 and 8 inches. The barbettes 11 to 14 inches. Turrets between 8 and 17.5 inches of armor. The conning tower 8 inches of armor, and the bulkheads between 10 and 12 inches. I don't see 7 inches anywhere on that figure. However, I would say this, I still do find it funny that the description I have in front of me is clearly states 16.5-inch guns. And yet, they always stick in them the Nelson guns. And they weren't going to be 16-inch guns. They weren't. I don't know where this comes from. Where this sort of they've put this all in. It's all been concluded. It's the idea, but they don't even reference a website where they get it from. That they were originally going to be the guns for the G3s. You know, I should check it out again just in case I've added it before I get into this too much of the rant, but. Yeah, I find it so strange. The British were working on 16.5-inch guns. They weren't. That's talking about. That's naval weapons of World War II, which is the American one produced by Annapolis. John Campbell's one. But that's no use, so yeah. I don't know where they get this idea from. The 16-inch gun is designed for the Nell rods. It's due to the treaty limitations. The British don't go for a 16-inch design without the treaties. Yeah. And that's the same person who asserts they were never laid down. I don't know. Seems to be mostly John Campbell is where their sources are for. Oh well. No, it's a 16.5-inch gun. That's what the British are working on. The British have options. It's an 18-inch or a 16.5-inch gun. That's what they're working on at that time period. That's what the next generation of guns are going to be after the 15-inch. 16.5-inch 45. Don't worry, I hope you enjoy it. But I had to go to kayak practice. Oh, I hope you had fun. Yeah, a luxury minivan would take a long time to work out. Also, can you deduct the 350 from your taxable income? We try. We tried, Thomas. We try. The competition will be repeated next year, and it will be repeated later on this year in another form. The competition entries I'm going to be getting to discussing at a certain point soon. They are currently... Hang on, have they gone to all the reviewers? I think there's one reviewer they haven't gone to yet. Because I'm sending them off as sort of big batch of... Here they are. Or might change that. Have they gone to... Maybe there's 2 reviews they haven't gone to. Every time I sit down and I get organising them into a list, there are issues. Usually people's emails. Nice to get everyone. I would be careful because the Royal Navy never publicly talks about when they're building ships what their armour is going to be. Let me put it this way, they will give rough figures, but they won't discuss things. So any figures they give should be treated with a huge pinch of salt that they actually give them, because, again, the British habit is not to reveal capabilities. The British habit is almost insanely secretive. The British, like the Americans, have a habit of underplaying the capability of their systems and underplaying the capability of their weapons in their public data. They will often not reveal the truth. So, yeah, and that's the same in this time as today. And one thing I can say, which is utterly annoying from having to spend as much time in the attic as I have recently, you do get dust everywhere. Now, about the 18-inch Agincourt, are you sure she would have 3 twins on a 4? Seems a little low for a battleship designer Louis and Jellicoe. Seems that Fisher was more responsible for the Renown class having 3 twin 15-inch guns. Okay, so here's the thing. The 3 twin 15-inch guns designed for the Renown class is based off previous design studies done for another ship. They dropped from 13.5-inch guns to 15-inch guns. They were prepared to drop to 8, from 10 guns to 8. Okay? So, let's be honest, 6 18-inch guns are still going to have, broadly speaking, more weight of broadside than 8 15-inch guns, thanks to the square cube law, and more weighted broadside than 10 13.5-inch guns. So I think 6 is okay. They'd be happy with it. It's the bare minimum they'll go to. And they could still fit on a Queen Elizabeth size hull. 8 guns, I don't think you could fit on a Queen Elizabeth hull. You'd have to make it bigger. I didn't miss that question, Knights. I answered it. I said they were looking at it because they were looking at it for efficiency, and I said they wouldn't continue on with it, because I combined the two questions. Because you had another one, which was, why didn't they carry on with it? So I seem to remember answering those two. Navy Web states sort of, yeah... I'm gonna have to do some work on these people, because there's if you go the actual if you go to the older books and the things about them, they're all 16.5-inch guns, and you go to the sources which the British are talking about in the period, it's 16.5-inch guns, and then suddenly there seems to be a rash of sources. I think it's almost as if the Americans are presuming they're 16-inch guns, and presuming they're the same guns, and haven't actually looked, and therefore they've been producing it. I know, Dan, you have no reading material. If you hear the words fun and interesting used, that'll be fun and interesting. It's either a very good thing or a very bad thing. You can work out from what, depending on the tonality used. Okay, the Foo, what are your questions? Yes, understating is always better, and it's always safer, especially for a democracy. It's always safer. Ricochet, honestly, it won't be an aircraft carrier. If you're given a blank check by the Spanish monarchy to rebuild the competence and strength of the Spanish Navy in 1890, can you get it ready for 1897? What do you order and build, and why? 1890. What do I order and build? In 1890. Well, I am probably very, very naughty. And when I say very, very naughty in 1890... I mean it. Because if I have a blanket check to do that, I'm probably going to go for some Centurion-class ships. I'm probably going to go to the Royal Navy and ask them to the British and ask them to build some Centurion ships. And I want about 3 sets of 4. They've got 10-inch guns. No one can really claim that I'm building them to smash up anyone. But with those, then I have a basis. I'd like some Royal Sovereigns as well, but getting those in is going to be slightly more of a tough thing. But if I go for Centurion class, they are the Royal Navy's second-class battleships, oceanic battleships, and they're going to be enough to defend my holdings in the Philippines, etc. I'm also going to want some cruisers, and that's going to be a slightly more interesting and debatable thing. I can order those ships, and if I order them straight off, then if I order them 1890, I can probably get them commissioned by 1894, which gives me 3 years to train them up and get the squadrons up to standard. What else do I... At that point as well, if once I've got them in service in 1894, I've ordered 12 of them. If I've got a blank check, then I'm probably going to go and ask for some... Oh, should I get some Majestics? Yeah, I'll get... should I get Majestics or Renowns? Renown has the advantage of having 10-inch guns again. And she is a 17-knot ship. And that would give me another set of 17-knot ships. But she's commissioned... She could go with Renowns. I could go with some Renowns. Yeah, I think I'll go with Renowns and Harvey armor. It's the best armor that's coming out. So either that or wait for the Majestics or the 12-inch guns. Tempting to wait for the 12-inch guns, but will I get them in service before 1897? Probably not. Whereas if in time for the war, but I can probably... Well, I can actually... Anything I order now is not going to be in time for 1897. So in 1894, I probably make an order actually for Majestics. I'm not going to get Renowned in time. I must wait for Majestics, so I must order 12 of those. And if that's my... And there's a reason I'm going for the Royal Navy, by the way. Because I'm an empire, I'm a global spanning empire, I have to operate, if you think about the oceans, I have to operate in, as the Spanish, I have to operate in the South China Sea and Philippine Sea and basically Pacific and Indian Ocean. I have to operate in the Central Atlantic and Caribbean. So yeah, I'm basically going to them because that's similar waters to where the Royal Navy's operating. And if you think again, if I'm making the order in 1890, then the Royal Navy are building the Edgar class cruisers, and they are some really good protected cruisers. And I want another 12 of those. So I want to order 12 of those in 1890. And I should have those in service fairly quickly. Again, they should be in service by about 1893. 1894. And so that gives me a core of 24 ships to build out from. 12 lovely Centurion class battleships with 10-inch guns, and 12 Edgar class 12 Edgar class cruisers with their 9.2-inch guns. And now at a certain point, I then need torpedo boats. And those I can get really from anyone. I can go from the French or anyone else, but, you know, I might as well, if I'm going for a Royal Navy scene, if I'm really building a lot, and I'll try and build as much as I can in Spain, but I'll be buying happily buying from the British as well, to get it in quickly if I have a blank check. I'm probably in 1890. What should I be looking at? What would I be looking at? Probably... Ooh, the Royal Navy 130 footers, maybe. Yeah. A nice 130 footers provided by Yarrow and Company, the TBs. Those ones could be quite good. Pretty nice big boats. Good ones for me to have. Yeah. I'm probably going to go for those. And I'm going to order, like, 60 of them. And that's my blank check. And the thing is, again, if I'm buying them off the British, and I'm buying off the British components, I can leech off the British logistics, the British infrastructure, and the British training. I can send officers to... I have reasons to send officers, good officers, to British training schools and training academies to learn how to use the equipment. And when they come back, I can use those to up my own standards of training. Take care, Dan. So being naughty, you paid the British to build pre-judge for you. Pretty much. Is there a US Army around a common equivalent to the 77 ID? I'm not sure what you're... Are you talking about the 77th Infantry Division? In which case, I think the British have their own 77th Infantry Division. But are you talking about the sustainment formation? There's quite a lot of different organisations which could fit that pattern, so I'm not quite sure what you're asking, Stafford. Can I just continue iterating on the furrow and her derivatives? Let's see. I could do. But the trouble is, furrow is laid down in 1896, and I want to start in 1890. So the thing is, I could... She is built actually in the UK. That's the point about furrow. She is built by Thompson, which becomes Clydebank Engineering. So basically, what I'm doing instead with her is in the furrow class is that I have started early of 1890, and probably I will. And again, that's actually historically what they did. They went to Britain. They bought the Destructor in 1885, and then they bought the furrow class in 1896. So what I'm doing is I'm buying them earlier. I'm starting off on the constructing torpedo boats earlier thing. And I will keep iterating on them and keep building new ones, but, you know, this is what I'm ordering in 1890. I'll be ordering more in 1892, more in 1894, more in 1896, and everyone... The moment I stop using them for frontline roles, they're going to a reserve fleet position. And so by the time, let's say, the US Navy turns up in the Philippines, they'll find themselves facing probably... Well, if they turn up in 1897... they could be dealing with three generations, 36 torpedo boats, a good four of the large cruisers, four of the capital ship, four of the Agate class, four of the Centurion class, and a nice load of light cruisers, all trained and all organised. I think the Battle of the Philippines goes. The Battle of Manila Bay goes very differently in that scenario. I don't think it happens in Manila Bay. I think the poor American cruisers come steaming in and go, "Oh, frigate! We're about to get blown to smithereens." Language says, have you ever thought of giving one of the higher patron tiers our patron suggestion video month for a short program? Well, it's going to sound strange, but the patron tiers I included were more a reality of the fact that some people were on originally. The original tiers were far lower. There was literally 2 tiers because I didn't think people would want to give that much money, and then I found some people who were giving me a lot of money, and I didn't feel they were being rewarded enough, so I added in higher patron tiers. But I've always been lurgy about making them have higher tiers, have extra choice suggestions and abilities for getting patron suggestions through, because I like the concept of everyone being able to suggest and everyone being able to vote who's a patron equally, regardless of how much they can give, because I realise some people are far more generous than others, and that's because they have more to be generous with, and that's very kind of them and very much appreciated by me, but I don't want anyone to feel they're treated differently because of their different levels of patronness, if that makes sense. Plus, literally in one of at least two of those higher tiers, there is literally just one person in them. So you literally will be giving one person a dedicated video. My main account was about, so Wikipedia, the founder of Unknowledge says one of your old 2 towns was 2 shaft. Does that cause issues? I think they're all 4 shaft designs. Let me just check. let's go through. Well, I would say if you're talking about HMS Birmingham, it says it has on Wikipedia. It says it has 4 turbines and 2 shafts. Then there's the one for Lowestoft, which claims she has 3 turbines and 4 shafts. And if we go with Nottingham class again, she has 4 turbines and 4 shafts. Considering the way they were structured, if they have 4 shafts, they have 4 turbines. So, Chatham is listed as 4 shafts and 3 turbines. Southampton on Wikipedia is listed as having 2 shafts, 12 boilers, and parts and steam turbines. But she is a Southampton subclass of the classes, which they usually have 2 steam turbine sets and 4 shafts. That's their standard. So they either have separate turbines per shaft, or they have a turbine set which will power 2 shafts. So I think that causes a lot of confusion with Wikipedia. So I just went with what I found in the books when I was reading about them, and I just went, okay, we're going to go with the 4 shafts, 4 turbines arrangement. But yes, it would change things, but I went with what was in the books rather than Wikipedia. As I've said before, my policy on Wikipedia is when I'm using modern equipment, talking about modern equipment, anything from about 1950 onwards, I will check what's written in Wikipedia to check what is publicly listed information. But when I'm talking pre-1950, I'll go with the books. Ah. The trouble with the British divisions is that some of them measure their... Let's put it this way. When you're talking about the British and their formations, the Coldstream Guards have been around since 1650. So that's merely a small amount of 374 years, roughly. I know there are some very interesting American units which do claim to be earlier, but mainly it's the Spanish, etc. There's the Honourable Artillery Company, which are 1537. They are possibly Britain's... There's the Yeomen of the Guard aren't a serving regiment anymore. So they don't... They're the King's Bodyguard, but they are a ceremonial formation now. But the Honourable Artillery Company still exists, and it is the oldest surviving still artillery regiment still in the service, and that's been going since 1537. The Americans claim things like the Massachusetts Bay Colony Militia are, the 181st Infantry Regiment are descended from them as part of the Massachusetts National Guard, and all sorts of things with that one. Then you have the Scots Guards, who like to claim they're from 1642, Coldstream Guards 1650, Grenadier Guards 1656. That's the problem. The Royal Marines are 1664. So this is, when you start looking up things like oldest regiments in the world, oldest units, military units in continuous use, etc. in the world, things get interesting. The food. Does the US even attempt the Spanish-American War, or do cooler hosts prevail as they did in 1876? Under that scenario, with that amount of firepower, perhaps they don't. Steve, like, would the ideas behind the Junicolor work for a relatively minor power like Spain? Not realistically, because Spain might be a relatively minor power in some of our considerations, but in this period they did not consider themselves or not act as a minor power, and their colonial holdings were spread far and wide and needed a lot of support. And there's the issue of the technical limitations of the fact that what they can do. How large was 6? Honestly, you could probably get down 6,000 tons. 6,200, 6,500. If you've got twin 6-inch guns and you've worked out a twin turret in, let's say, 1914, you could probably have done that on 6,500 to 6,500 tons. I'm not, Knight 681, I'm not getting into the whole DK Brown stuff because there are all sorts of interesting things he puts there. And whilst he is very right on so many things, with the 16.5-inch guns and the G3s, I don't necessarily think he is right. Because one of the things is that was the point is that probably could well have been told to them, but that doesn't mean they went with the 1616 and twin 18, because the 16.5-inch might not be the same diameter as the twin 18, but you could still fit the twin 18 in a 16.5-inch. So the thing is, you've still got that options. So honestly, that doesn't really make sense. Okay, yes, you're going to make a turret which has a wider ring than it needs. Oh, goodness me, you'll have a more spacious turret. That's not going to cause anyone much of a problem. So, yeah, I've remembered reading that and thinking, that sounds a bit weird, and I put it in front of my dad, and he, of course, worked with DK, and he liked him and he didn't like him in some regards. I would agree about Yeomen of the Guard being composed of ex-NCOs and being not an organisation I would like to have an argument with. Documentation on the 18-inch on the HMS Agincourt is interesting, rare, and something me and Drac are searching for. The more we find it interesting to locate the documentation, the more interested we get. That said, I look forward to someday being proven wrong or proven right on my suspicions. So, with that all said, and the question's sort of slowing down, what have we got coming next week? Next week is Conception, Operation, Conclusion, Lexington class. That should be fun. That should be fun. Anyway, I'm going to be popping onto Discord in a bit after a quick comfort break. Thank you very much everyone who's been here. Hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you enjoyed the chat. Hope you enjoyed the trial of doing some UAD streaming to add in, because I was trying to figure out how to actually give you some decent sort of stuff for this evening, because again, the point is, it works to an extent, it doesn't always work. UAD and YouTube aren't always happy with each other. Thank you, Carl. Thank you, John Shea. Thank you, Michael Cooch. Thank you, DG40. Thank you, Blackbird Maximus. Thank you, Knight6831. Lots of people have decided they were to be 16-inch guns because that fits with what happens next. But the first thing you have to realise is that the G3 guns had to be in development a lot earlier than and selected and already under construction when they start building. Hello? Issue? Sorry, I'm hearing something on the phone. On the thing, I'm gonna pop in and sort out the house because I think there might be something on the phone. There's something just come over the camera. I have no idea what it was, but thank you very much, everyone. Take care, and I'll be on Discord in a bit. Take care, everyone.